Monday and quite a pleasant morning. But it won't last too long. We're going to see this cloud and rain steadily moving westwards. We're going to see drizzle and rain ahead of it, and then heavy rain arriving into the afternoon. Strong southerly winds as well, particularly through the Irish Sea, where we could see some gales as well. But ahead of that, warm and humid air, and we could still get 26 degrees in the far east of England, but cooler underneath this rain, at best into the teens. And we do have a rain warning out as well. There could be some very difficult driving conditions with the strong wind and spray on the road as we head through the evening for southwest Scotland. Unsettled then as we head through the rest of the week, with some particularly wet and windy weather across the north on Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GB News Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am, having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said Storm. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dewbs Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. Welcome to GB News live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it is yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is the former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, also former Labour advisor James Schneider. Right, well, on the menu, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has pledged to crack down on people pushing harmful and hateful beliefs. The scale of the migrant crisis is getting out of control, and Labour's approach working? And as Robert Jenrick lays out 10 principles for the future of the Conservatives, are they already dead and buried? Well, before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour. It's understood dozens of people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and Lebanon. Iran-backed Hezbollah has continued firing rockets in retaliation. It comes as Israel's Prime Minister expressed cautious optimism about a ceasefire deal with Hamas, including for the release of hostages. The militant group isn't present for the talks, but senior officials claim there's been no progress in reaching a deal. Meanwhile, President Biden claims he's remaining optimistic that an agreement is closer than ever. In other news, there are concerns that the safety of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is deteriorating after a drone strike. It caused an explosion just outside the site's protected area, although no casualties have been reported. The facility, the largest of its kind in Europe, has been occupied by Russian soldiers since the early stages of the war. It comes as Ukraine's incursion continues into Russian territory. Former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chip Chapman, says British-donated equipment is helping Ukraine push back Vladimir Putin.
One of the things that the offensive does is establish momentum and initiative and gives more willingness to continue to support Ukraine, because what you can say previously is that they were losing slowly, and initially the provision of support equalised the battlefield, and now at least the momentum and initiative is with them in a tactical sense.
A biotech firm that produces an mpox vaccine is ramping up production after a new strain was found in Europe. The clade 1b strain has been confirmed in Sweden after first being detected in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's believed to be the most dangerous version of the disease so far. Official figures reveal almost 500 people crossed the English Channel yesterday. At least 9 small boats made the journey following 2 days of no reported migrant arrivals. It brings the total number of migrants reaching UK waters so far this year to 19,000. The Home Office insists it's creating a new border security command to tackle the problem. The Home Secretary is promising to crack down on people she says are pushing harmful and hateful beliefs in a new approach to fighting extremism. Yvette Cooper is launching a rapid sprint to look at how best to tackle the extremist threats, including rising radicalisation among young people online. The initiative follows violent riots across England after the Southport stabbings, with over 460 people appearing in court, including more than 70 minors. In Northern Ireland, a convicted murderer who was on the run has now been apprehended after an urgent manhunt. David McCord was sentenced to life in prison in 2004 for the murder of his girlfriend. Over the weekend, police worked to trace his whereabouts, who was considered unlawfully at large, and issued an appeal for the prisoner to turn himself in. Police located McCord in the Belfast area, and he's been returned to prison. A don't swim alert's been issued for a popular Devon seaside town because of a sewage leak. South West Water says it can't keep up with the spill caused by a burst pipe at a nearby pumping station in Exmouth. It's apologised and insists engineers are working around the clock to fix the problem. It comes after the regulator Ofwat announced water bills will rise an average of £94 over 5 years to cover the cost of upgrading Victorian-age infrastructure. It was also revealed that 3 water companies, not including South West Water, are facing a combined fine of £168 million for failings, including over sewage treatment. Around 30 people have been left injured after 2 Ferris wheel gondolas caught fire at a music festival in Germany. Pictures showed the ride in flames at Highfield Festival at Stormthaler Lake near Leipzig. Festival organisers say 18 people are being treated in hospital. The cause of the blaze is unknown. And Donald Trump went on the attack at a campaign event in Pennsylvania last night, twice telling supporters he was better looking than his election rival. The former president was delivering a speech focused on the economy when he asked supporters if they'd mind if he went off script.
I'm a better looking person than Kamala. No, I couldn't.
His opponents planning a bus tour starting in Pittsburgh today. Americans head to the polls in November. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good afternoon. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News Live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, the Home Secretary announced a new crackdown on extremism, pledging to tackle harmful ideologies and address gaps in the current policies. But should extreme misogyny be treated as terrorism? I'll also be joined by lawyer Stephen Barrett and political commentator Rebecca Reid. Then, is Labour's approach to the small boat crisis working? GB News can confirm that more than 19,000 small boat migrants have now crossed the English Channel this year, with over 5,000 of them crossing the Channel since Labour came to power. Have they lost control? In World View, we'll get the latest on the presidential race. And could Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump? I'll bring you the latest polling stats. Are Labour's policies a false economy, scrapping the winter fuel payment, minimum service levels repealed, and private schools at risk of closure? What is Starmer bringing to the table? Right, so the government has announced extreme misogyny will be treated as a form of extremism under the new government plans to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says. There's been a rise in extremism both online and on our streets, and we'll review the UK's current counter-terrorism strategy and determine how best to deal with the situation. Joining me from outside the Home Office is GB News reporter Ray Addison. Ray, so tell me a little bit more about what Yvette Cooper is proposing.
Well, some people are saying that this seems like a rather extreme way of tackling this problem. Under the proposals involved in this scheme, teachers would be legally required to refer pupils that they suspect of extreme misogyny to Prevent. Of course, that's the UK government's counter-terror programme. The aim being that they would then help to counter and address violence against women and girls. But of course, Prevent is well known for dealing with and trying to intervene with young people who are showing an interest or getting involved with terror organisations or showing some kind of sympathy towards terror groups and causes, and to then use the same organisation to deal with young people who are saying things which are deemed to be extremely misogynistic could be and has been argued to be a misuse and sort of a downplay of the seriousness of the terror threat to the United Kingdom. Now, of course, this organisation, this scheme that they're introducing is being called Sprint. Home Secretary is saying it's a strategic reset on how the government will tackle hateful or harmful activity. And they are keen to stress as well that as part of this review, they will be looking at how they tackle the far-right ideologies, extreme Islamist ideologies as well. But this is the one that's kind of really caught people's attention, this idea that extreme misogyny could be tackled and that people's children, when they go to school, they might say the wrong thing and they could get referred to this counter-terror organisation. Now, I took a quick look and we haven't had a comment so far that I've been able to find from the Shadow Home Sec, James Cleverly. Remember, he's also the candidate to become Tory leader as well. And so one wonders why he hasn't sort of waded in on this, because it's really catching the attention of the public.
I think the Tories have forgotten that they are the opposition party. They're too busy navel-gazing, I think. But Ray, there is a category within this Prevent strategy called incel, and that does cover involuntary celibate is what it means. It refers to male subculture and includes violent feelings towards women as a result of feeling rejected and stuff like that. Surely there's enough to encompass within the legislation without needing to add something more.
Well, arguably, I mean, I posted this up on social media this morning, and the main comment seems to be from my followers: who gets to decide that something is extreme? Who gets to decide that something is misogynistic? And obviously we've seen debated in the public, haven't we, in recent weeks, this sort of argument that there is the concept of two-tier policing depending upon what cause you follow. And we have seen for a very long time, haven't we? We've seen Labour politicians referring to Conservatives as right-wing, which I think previously we could all agree was a term that we might only use to refer to the most extreme sort of far-right beliefs and agendas. And so this seems to be the key argument that people are making right now. Who determines these terms, and how will they do so, and how will that affect us? Of course, Labour did say they were going to do this in their manifesto, so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise.
Well, it will be interesting. And what does extremism mean? What is the definition? Ray Addison, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. That is Ray Addison, GBNews reporter. Well, joining me now to discuss this is barrister and writer Stephen Barrett. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the programme. I want to start with, Ray did actually pose a very valid question. Who gets to determine where the line is drawn for that word extreme? What does extremism mean when we come to this? Who is the arbiter?
Yes, and that is the crucial point. And it's not just extreme, it's also the word hate. And it's who's going to be defining these lines, who's going to be deciding what is and isn't hate, what is and isn't extreme. Hate just means intense dislike, Nana. Now, I've noticed that I've taken the precaution that you are already sitting down, so I hope you don't faint from the words that I'm about to say, but I hate oysters. And I should have the freedom to hate oysters as long as I want to. I'm an adult in a free democratic country. Why are we seeking to police intense dislike of things by other adults? It strikes me as impossible to do. I think that's why the Scottish government got themselves into such a mess. I don't know if you remember their nonsense cartoon character and the absurd situation they appear to be in. It does seem that all across the West, we are returning to this idea that maybe we should, censor and police everybody's thoughts and feelings, which we got rid of in the 16th and 17th century because it was a really bad idea. And if that's where we're going, it's just going to get bloody and messy, and it's going to be awful. But really, Nana, I suspect that the reason for this is that substantive politics is dying. We don't seem to debate or talk about real policies anymore. And instead, what you get is performative or declarative announcements designed simply to signal virtue. I think your reporter was right to immediately sort of pounce on what they want as a response from the Conservative Party, that they can then turn around and say, oh, you're pro-misogyny because you don't support this. So you must, and this is just infantile. This is very, very childish way of doing non-substantive politics.
Well, but go on. Make that point, please.
A final point I like to make is that we are a developed democracy and we have bucket loads of laws, absolutely bucket loads of them. So we have a finite number of police officers. So every time you do something like invent a new law or push forward a new strategy, you're effectively calling for less policing of what already exists. You're saying the other things that are crimes, police them less in order to police this thing. And it does feel as though the priority of this government is our thoughts and feelings, by the way, our private thoughts and feelings, and not really things like, has somebody broken into my house? Has somebody stolen something from me? The old days when I was young and property was taken very seriously and mattered seems to have gone, and we seem to be meandering towards thought crimes, and everybody, making the right mantra and saying the right thing in order to not get arrested.
Stephen, but hasn't Yvette Cooper got a point? Because the point that she's making is with regard to, extreme misogyny that is leading many men to commit heinous crimes against women and girls. And those numbers of crimes seem to be, they're almost but I can't say the word, but there are loads of them. So Yvette is trying to tackle that.
If that's true, if that's true. But we need to be very careful about seeking to police ideas and thoughts. Nobody wants crime against women and girls, and there are a huge number of strategies in place already to reduce it. I mean, it'd be far better from a policy point of view to simply review how those are working, and if they're not working, well, then invent better ones that do work, because we all want crimes against women and girls to go down. But classifying, I mean, I heard a point this morning which I think is right. To be terrorism, it has to be a broad political practice. Does anybody truly want to erase women? I mean, is that what's going on? I don't think that.
Well, I think that's an interesting question that you say, and as you ask that, I think actually there are quite a few crimes that I could potentially put under this category, including some forms where people are saying that a woman cannot be a man and a man cannot be a woman. We'll find ourselves stuck in the gender debate as well, I think, on this one. Yeah.
Well, until we return to truth and simple, clear laws, we will keep walking into these traps, into these chaoses. It's not the role of law, really, to police every aspect of people's lives. The role of the legal system is to create a broadly functioning state that we can all live and prosper in peacefully. And I think that too much pressure is being put on the legal system. Too much expectation is there. I was doing something recently for a project I've got on free speech laws, and we have huge numbers of laws that police all of this already. I mean, the idea that there's a need for a new one is I think, simply wrong as law. I mean, what we're not doing is enforcing the laws that we have.
That would be good. That would be good if that could happen, Stephen. We've run out of time. Really good to talk to you. That's Stephen Barrett. He's a barrister and a writer. Always a pleasure to talk to him with his thoughts. Right, joining me now, author and broadcaster Rebecca Reid. Rebecca Reid, thank you very much for joining me. In theory, this sounds like a positive move. We're protecting women and girls. But the worry is that the legislation, or if it does become legislation and it does become a thing, could then sort of start encompassing other things that it wasn't meant to encompass.
I don't think that's a real or realistic risk. I have to say, I have found listening to Stephen's speech just then very, very difficult to tolerate, because this suggestion that there isn't a problem, or that we're not sure if there's a problem, or we don't know if there's a problem, is risible. As of March, 50 British women had been murdered by a man in this country. That's only March. We're now in August. And 2 million women a year are victim of violence from men in this country. And even Mark Rowley, and I have no great love for the police service, but even Mark Rowley, who is a fairly old school copper, said that we should be treating violence against women and girls as a national emergency in this country. There is no question from any of the data that this is getting worse and worse. And we have to do something. You can't just sit there and go, yeah, it's awful, isn't it? And then do nothing. There is a reason this is happening. And that reason is twofold. Partially, domestic violence gets dramatically worse in times of low economic prosperity because people are unhappy, people are more stressed. So therefore, relationships are under more tension, and that tends to come from that side of it. That's always been true throughout history. However, there is a new strand, which was not previously a problem, which is the radicalization of young men, and that comes from different strands. There is a strand of radical Islam and Islamification, particularly the side of the internet that wants to groom people for ISIS, that absolutely despises women. And then there's also a more predominantly white side of this, the Meninist, Manosphere, Andrew Tate side, also absolutely hates women. So the amount of radicalization of young men online is now staggering. And of course, the prolificness of the internet in our lives is dramatically higher. So all this is aiming to do is bring Prevent in line so that whether you are hating people because they are brown, because they are Muslim, because they are Catholic, or because they are female, all of those strategies for radicalization are roughly the same, and it basically empowers the law to be able to treat it as much of a problem if you hate someone because they're a woman as if you hated them because they were Hindu, Sikh, or South Asian.
But also Ray raised a good point, that who gets to determine what is extreme in these situations? Do you take that could be a problem?
So the word extreme has not previously, I've been doing this debate for since I was basically a teenager, and I've never heard extreme attached to misogyny before. It always used to be, should misogyny be a hate crime? And that, I think, does run into a bit of a tricky ground, because commenting on a woman's body could be misogynistic. Saying a woman is ugly could be misogynistic. So there, I think we could have had a problem, but they've been very specific to call it extreme misogyny. So just calling somebody a fat cow is not extreme misogyny. It's not nice, it's not polite, but it's not extreme misogyny.
Well, somebody could think that is. Like somebody, I might think, well, that is extreme.
You might, but I think we would use much the same. The good thing about this is that you can effectively do a copy and paste when it was brought into law that someone's race or religion were a protected characteristic. So in the same way that you could sit in a pub and say, I think there are too many immigrants in this country. Now, I personally would find that I might go and sit at a different table, but you have a right to say that. But so that's not hate speech. I might not like it, but it's not hateful. Whereas if you said there are too many N-words or P-words in this country, that is hate speech and that is a protected characteristic. So you have to do a certain amount of agreement and research, and hopefully it could be a cross-party consensus, because the Tory party has actually had a pretty good track record over the years on this. You know, David Cameron particularly really did push for this. So I trust at least the centre part of the Tory party. And the Tory party, you know, Kemi Badenoch, for instance, I think has previously written some very sensible things about the maternity gap and those issues. So there are a lot of Tories I would trust to do a cross-party consensus about what constitutes extreme misogyny. But the core of it is, if you are inciting violence against women because they are violent, because they are women, rather than because you're inciting violence full stop, that is a different crime. Yeah. Hating someone because they're a woman is different from just hating them full stop.
All right, Rebecca Reid, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's Rebecca Reid. She's an author and broadcaster. Well, what do you think? GBNews.com/your say. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, is Labour's approach to the small boat crisis working? As 19,000 people have already crossed, 5,000 of which in the last month since Keir Starmer was in charge. Next, extreme misogyny. Should it be treated as terrorism? This is GB News.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, parents should be given a £5,000 tax break to encourage them to have more children. That's according to a think tank called Onward.
Yes, their report suggests that the cost of parenthood is preventing couples from having as many children as they would like, and maybe actually stopping them from having a baby indeed at all. So with the birth rate at a record low, which is dangerous for our economy, isn't it? We are asking, should there be financial incentives to have children?
Let's talk to journalist Julie Cook and consultant Hilary Salt. Good to see you both. Julie, what do you think? I mean, should I be in effect, handing over my hard-earned money, in tax dollars at least, to couples so they can procreate?
I actually think it's a good idea, and I'm not a lefty by any stretch of the imagination, but we are in quite a critical time in terms of our population. Although our population is growing because of our ageing population, our birth rate is dangerously low. And according to the Lancet, I think we're going to be, I've got it written here, birth rate will drop to 1.38 by 2050 and 1.3 by 2100. And this is too low to sustain an ageing population. So although we've got lots of elderly now, you know, that's how it is, we don't have enough babies being born. And a booming baby boom is actually a sign of a booming economy. And I think people are scared now because of the cost of living. We've had COVID, we've now got this crisis. Why would people have a baby now? It's a terrifying time. But if you gave them an incentive, it might well boost our population, our birth rate.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm here, I'm not here, I am here. 25 after 3, welcome. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time now for the Great British Debate This Hour. I'm Nana Akua, and I'm asking you, should extreme misogyny be treated as terrorism? Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is vowing to crack down on the spread of harmful and hateful beliefs, and the government is launching a new initiative to tackle extremist ideologies across the UK. And this rapid sprint project aims to fill gaps in the current system, addressing the growing threat posed by ideologies that incite violence and undermine democracy. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should extreme misogyny be treated as terrorism? Joining me is former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, and also former Labour advisor, James Schneider. Right, well, I'm going to start with you, Oscar Redrop. It's your first time with me. What are your thoughts on this?
It's a really, really tricky one. I think if we just zoom out very quickly before we really get into it, it's August. There isn't a lot of... Well, there is no parliamentary scrutiny at the moment. There is a need to fill column inches. Yvette Cooper has been incredibly front foot. Obviously, the riots kind of took up a lot of her time.
Why was she in them?
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully not. That would be a good story. But she's being very, very, very front foot with her language and aggressive. And she was on the riots, and she is on this issue as well. I think that if it was to have to really be stacked up and stand up to parliamentary scrutiny, I'm not sure how far it would get. It's a really, really difficult one, because if people are, you know, inciting...
Why wouldn't it get? First of all, they've got a massive majority, so it's not that difficult. And if they convince everybody in their party, or put a whips underneath it and tell everybody to behave in a certain way, I could see this sailing through.
Because I think the definition point here is really, really complicated. I think there's a balancing act that I think we just about get right in this country, just about. However, I'm not going to sit here and say that we shouldn't have serious conversations, because it does happen. It completely happens, whereby people incite violence that end up with people dying. And so you can't just sit back and ignore that. And I think Rebecca made a very good point just before the break on that. But the 1984 kind of stuff that you also hinted at... But the
focus is on women and girls. What do you think, James Schneider?
So we have a real problem with violence against women and girls. But I don't think this is going to do very much for that at all. I think overwhelmingly our responses should be to do with dealing with actions first rather than words, and where we have...
So you're saying wait till it actually happens and then...
No. I'm saying, for example, where rape has been in effect decriminalised, I think dealing with that is going to be a much more significant thing for dealing with violence against women and misogyny in society than trying to legislate what types of language do or don't fall outside of this thing, which is going to be legally complex, and then bolstering Prevent, which is a programme which, you know, doesn't work probably at best.
It doesn't work that way.
Right, doesn't work at best, which also puts on quite strange legal positions on teachers and so on and so forth. So it's like it's using, I think, the wrong device, the wrong framework. Terrorism is the wrong framework. Prevent is the wrong tool to deal with a very real and serious problem. And it's like saying we're going to legislate away this social issue rather than we are going to actually tackle it. And actually tackling it is going to be a lot more difficult than saying, oh, teachers now need to refer some extra pupils to the local council.
I think... Sorry, Anna. No, I think there's about 52,000 people on the watch list at the moment from counter-terrorism in this country, which is a huge amount, vast. And I think, you know, in terms of terrorism, which is a word, very, very specific word that brings out very specific feelings in people. And I think maybe adding to that and overburdening probably the security issues that our security services deal with expertly that we don't even know about, I think you have to be really, really careful what you throw into that term of terrorism.
The point of this is that it is almost like a form of grooming online, where you've got people like Andrew Tate suggesting things that are very misogynistic, and lots of young boys all going along with it or hearing something in it that sort of relates to them. So what she is ultimately saying is that stuff like that should be put in the bag of this. But then I thought they did have incel, which was involuntary celibate, which refers to a male subculture that involves violent feelings towards women as a result of feeling rejected and stuff like that. That's already within Prevent. So why does... I'm just wondering whether we do actually need more legislation.
I mean, I don't think that we do. We need to do other things to tackle the real big problem. And as we're hearing from your previous guest, the number of women that are killed in domestic violence and so on is absolutely terrible.
But isn't that the beginning of it? Like this bad language, treating women badly. It's to do with how you've been educated with how.
But so let's take the Andrew Tate example.
Okay.
What is going to counter some of the things that he's saying to young boys? I don't think it's going to be banning some of his content, which is people will find it another way and it will give it a certain allure. The way you're going to deal with that is having like counsellors in schools that are showing good role models for as men to younger boys, mentoring, helping people into work. All of these like much broader, softer things are the way in which you build a cohesive and inclusive society. You can't just have a society that's fractured and then it's playing whack-a-mole all the time, saying there's this problem over here, someone said something bad over here, we're going to stop that, and it doesn't deal with any of the underlying things. So I think it's good that the Home Secretary is thinking about violence against women. That's really good.
Yeah.
But I think using this existing framework, using prevent, using counter-terrorism as the frame, gets us going in the wrong direction. Doesn't deal with... I mean, if rape isn't being dealt with properly, which it isn't, and if there is structural misogyny within some police forces, which we have seen, those are the things that really the Home Secretary should be dealing with as the first order of business.
Even Mark Rowley, the Met Commissioner, says that violence against women and girls should be treated as a national security threat. So this is somebody who's head of the police commissioner who actually sees the problems and is dealing with them on a daily basis. And they've accused Andrew Tate of radicalising boys. And I do believe there is a point to that. Even though radicalisation is not happening in the form of terrorism in terms of, as we know it, with, bombs and things like that, this is still a similar thing, isn't it, surely?
Well, look, I mean, and to address the slight elephant in the room, we are both blokes, and so to a degree, and I don't know if I'm speaking for you here, but I have the benefit of being able to walk around a city like London, let's say, and by and large feel totally and utterly safe and never concerned about my personal safety.
Well, lucky you.
Well, exactly. So in a way, and even though I'm the panellist here, I'd be interested to know your direct thoughts on this, Nana, because in some ways, because of that...
Some of my thoughts on this are that something does need to be done. And I think that we actually already have the legislation within the Prevent. If I even look at it, I can see, reading there, I do believe that we have the legislation necessary. My only fear with this sort of thing is that who determines where the line is for the word extreme? And at that point, then there's a lot of things that can be encompassed in it. But I do believe that there is something that needs to be done. But I'm with you, James, that perhaps the framework is not Prevent, and perhaps there is another framework that could be set up specifically for misogyny towards against women and girls. That's what I think.
Yeah, that seems very sensible. And if we're talking about dealing with putting more stress on teachers, then maybe they should be supported to help kids not have misogynistic views rather than sending them off to counter-terrorism watch lists.
But to be fair, this is a start. I mean, it's a start, but I'm not so sure that it does feel a bit 1984ish. But what do you think? GBNews.com/your say. Next is Labour's approach to the small boats crisis working. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. It's understood at least 24 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza overnight, including some women and children. It comes as the Israeli Prime Minister says he's cautiously optimistic about a potential ceasefire. However, a senior Hamas representative says any deal is still a way off. In Ukraine, safety at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is deteriorating, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. An explosive detonated just outside the site's protected area, which has been occupied by Russian soldiers since the early stages of the war. Official figures show 9 migrant boats were brought ashore from the English Channel yesterday, carrying almost 500 people. Hundreds more have made the crossing this week, bringing the total number reaching UK waters so far this year to 19,000. The Home Secretary is launching a major crackdown on misogyny, saying it will be treated as a form of extremism. Yvette Cooper has ordered a review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how best to tackle threats posed by harmful ideologies. The analysis will look at hatred of women as one of the ideological trends that the government says is gaining traction. A don't swim alert's been issued for Exmouth Beach in Devon after South West Water admitted it was struggling to contain a sewage leak. The firms apologise for a burst pipe and insist engineers are working around the clock to fix the problem. And there are fears a new strain of Mpox is already in the UK after emerging first in Africa. The Clade 1b strain has been confirmed in Sweden and is thought to be the most dangerous so far. Symptoms include a fever and a painful rash, which produces blisters. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Sunny spells continuing through Sunday with a couple of showers further north, but it has all changed as we move into Monday with some rain arriving. And that's from these frontal systems out in the Atlantic. But first, we do have a ridge of high pressure firmly across at least the southern half of the UK. It's even quite a settled afternoon. So plenty of sunshine around. There is some cloud around, but that'll generally start to melt away through this evening. But further north, we do start to see the beginning of these frontal systems, bringing some cloud and some rain across northwest Scotland. We also do see some drizzly showers moving into the southwest for southwest and parts of Wales as well. Cool though ahead of this, temperatures down into single figures in some eastern parts, and there may be a few mist and fog patches to start the day on Monday too. And fairly bright and sunny if you're starting the day in the far northeast of Scotland, but it is already going to be quite a cloudy picture with quite persistent rain, some of this quite heavy at times, particularly in western parts as well. Northern Ireland seeing a very cloudy start to the day, rain already very close by and quite drizzly conditions. Wales and the southwest holding on to these very drizzly showers moving through this morning, but the central and southeastern half of England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday and quite a pleasant morning. But it won't last too long. We're going to see this cloud and rain steadily moving westwards. We're going to see drizzle and rain ahead of it, and then heavy rain arriving into the afternoon. Strong southerly winds as well, particularly through the Irish Sea, where we could see some gales as well. But ahead of that, warm and humid air, and we could still get 26 degrees in the far east of England, but cooler underneath this rain at best into the teens. And we do have a rain warning out as well. There could be some very difficult driving conditions with the strong wind and spray on the road as we head through the evening for southwest Scotland. Unsettled then as we head through the rest of the week with some particularly wet and windy weather across the north on Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
Good afternoon, Britain. Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
39 minutes after 3 o'clock. If you just tuned in, welcome. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app. And also, remember, you can vote in my poll on X right now. I'm asking, will Labour's plan to crack down on hateful beliefs threaten free speech? Right now, though, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is Labour's approach to the small boat crisis working? As more than 19,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel this year. The scale of the challenge facing the new government is clear to see. And on Saturday, clear to see, get the pun? On Saturday alone, more than 450 people made the dangerous journey from France with Border Force intercepting multiple boats and processing hundreds of migrants at Dover. Home Security Editor, Mark White, brought us this report.
There are probably a slightly fewer coming across than we would have expected now that we're in the height of summer. But there have been some days where it's been a bit windy in the channel, including this week. So I was in Dover earlier in the week on the cliff top there reporting on another milestone that 5,000 migrants had crossed the channel illegally since Labour came to power. And then we had 2 or 3 days of windy weather, and it's only now, this weekend, that things have calmed down enough to allow more boats to come. And sure enough, we had just after 11 o'clock this morning, the Border Force vessel Ranger coming in with 50-odd migrants. It returned again with another 40 migrants. Then the Border Force vessel Defender was in as well with 135 migrants on board. And so it continued throughout the day with our producer down in Dover estimating that at least 9 small boats came into UK waters carrying more than 450 people, taking the total for the year to now more than 19,000, and of course that milestone as well to 5,500 since Labour came to power, promising to smash the gangs. They scrapped the Rwanda deal on the first day in office. It was, according to Sir Keir Starmer, a gimmick. Instead, what he wants to do is go after the people smugglers. But that's going to take some time. They haven't even managed to appoint a new senior officer in charge of this new Border Security Command, and that's over 6 weeks since Labour came to power. So they've got some way to go to achieve this goal of supposedly smashing the gangs. And while they don't do that, then all of the time when the weather improves, we'll get boat after boatload coming to the UK.
Right, so that was our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Joining me now, Oscar Redrop, he's a former advisor to Boris Johnson, and also James Schneider, he's the former Labour advisor. James Schneider, I'll come to you first. Labour's approach to the small boat crisis. We've got the Border Command Control, and don't know if there's anything else. What else have they got?
I think new bloke in a new shiny suit, which is it's pretty consistent with what the previous, I guess, 3 prime ministers were all doing, which is have a lot of theatre around the channel, fly planes over, put journalists on, embedded into boats, lots of high drama, and really
and Rwanda. Don't forget Rwanda.
Well, yeah, which never happened and was a nonsense anyway. So.
Well, you think that, but
yeah. Anyway, but I think it was a nonsense, and also it's not happening. So it's and it never happened, and it's gone. But I don't really think that this is a crisis, and the reason why they're talking in this sort of tough way, in the same way as the previous ones were speaking in a tough way, is because it's theatre, it's performance. It's not really aimed at dealing with the issue that most of the people who are coming across are needing a place of safety and are refugees.
Oh, come on. A lot of them are coming here as economic migrants, let's be honest.
The main countries that people... I am being honest. I'm also backed up by evidence, which is the rates at which they are granted refugee status.
Refugees... men, then, is it, who are suffering with this crisis, and the women?
84% are men. Yes. If you want the numbers.
Well, that's the point. So it's mostly men coming on these boats, and as I say, fighting age men. I'll use that because they are usually young, fit men. So if there are really such crises in their country, where are the women? Why are the women not on these boats?
I mean, it's a dangerous and difficult journey to get here. Hold on, and if you look at the biggest countries where people have been come from are Afghanistan, Iran, and so on. Where there are countries where they aren't refugees, which was Albania, that's dealt with by having a grown-up agreement with another government. At the moment, the one I have a question about, because I don't know what the driving factors are. This year, for some reason, Vietnamese nationals are.
What's going on in Vietnam?
Well, I don't know. But so the answer to that might be that the government needs to have an agreement with the Vietnamese government. But in saying that, you've literally discounted your first point. The point that you no, I haven't. But the overwhelming bulk of them.
But you've just
are from Afghanistan, Iran, Turkish Kurdistan,
I'm not buying
Syria.
Oscar Redrock, because we're running out of time, but I do appreciate that.
So, on your half of the Labour Party, I have to say I have a degree of admiration because they have the belief system to talk about immigration as only a positive thing. And, you know, you can then look at someone from James's part of the Labour Party and go, I don't like it, I disagree. But ultimately, you can respect it. The problem that Keir Starmer's got himself into is he does all the tough talking, he's called out Rwanda as a gimmick. Smash the gangs, to me, sounds pretty gimmicky. And now they're in government, I think they're going to start seeing that actually smashing the gangs, this new controlled border force team,
command control.
It's not going to deliver. It's not going to do it. And then all of a sudden, the gimmick that was, Rwanda was called for so long by the Labour Party.
It'll be back.
They are now accountable. You're in government now. These numbers are down to you. And lastly on it, and this is just an objective fact, immigration is one of the top issues for the general public in this country. Rightly or wrongly, that's the fact, and the government will have to deal with it.
All right, well, listen, what are your thoughts? GBNews.com/You're Saying Next is Worldview Professor of US Politics David Dunn will be joining me to give us the latest on the presidential race.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
Well, I'm joined now by royal biographer and former royal photographer, Ian Lloyd. Ian,
hello, Jacob.
Thank you
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining me. This is going to be great, isn't it? The opportunity to go around and see where the King comes onto the balcony from. Really interesting insight to how Buckingham Palace works.
It's exciting. I went yesterday, there was a press preview, and the thing that struck me first of all is that if you're the King and or the late Queen and you're on the balcony, you can't see the Mall. I mean, we all see people coming down from the top, thousands of people crowding in towards Buckingham Palace. They can't see it because of this great monument to Queen Victoria called the Queen Victoria Memorial, or they call it the wedding cake, but it blocks the view. So apparently the King has a TV in there. And the late Queen did as well. So what they do is they when they're waiting to come on, they're watching the TV to see how the crowd's getting nearer the palace. And the other thing that struck me is when we were on it looking down, is you can actually see individual faces in the crowd out there because we looked out, So they do get a good view of what's happening directly underneath the palace,
So they can see individuals. So if there's a friendly face in the crowd, they can see that person and possibly even wave. But they can't see that enormous mass of people you get at the big events that goes back towards Admiralty Arch.
The other thing I learned is there's a great historical link because the person that put the east wing on the palace, because it was originally 3 sides, and Queen Victoria had, of course, 9 children, so they had to build a 4th side for all the nurseries and things. Edward Blord was the architect, but the master builder was Thomas Cubitt.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, love him or hate him, Donald Trump and, of course, Kamala Harris. The presidential race is heating up as the Democratic National Convention kicks off tomorrow in Chicago. And it's good news for Kamala Harris, as a new poll has actually got her leading ahead of Donald in several key battleground states, including Arizona and North Carolina, and chasing Trump in Georgia and in Nevada. If you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Let's speak to Professor of US Foreign and Security Policy, David Dunn. David, it seems that Kamala, supposedly on these polls, is actually ahead of Trump in some of these key states.
Yes, what we've seen is a dramatic turnaround in this race from when Biden dropped out. His poll numbers were plummeting. He was in danger of losing formerly safe Democratic seats. And what we've seen is the polls narrow considerably, where, as you say, there are some polls giving Kamala Harris a 4-point lead. It's important to say, however, these are more or less within the margin of error, and importantly also to say that they are nowhere near as good as Hillary Clinton's lead at this stage of the polls 7 or 8 years ago. So this is still very much a neck-and-neck race, and it's not clear that all the movement, the trajectory of Harris is on the up. It's not clear that the election will be hers. This is still a very tight race.
But the tactic that Donald Trump appears to be using is one of he's been slagging her off. He was saying how he's better looking than her and all this kind of thing. Does that appear to be working in his favour?
One of the extraordinary things is we're hearing from his team, who are very frustrated about the way in which he actually goes on these personal attacks, which he said, by the way, he said, I'm entitled to attack her. I don't think she's very bright, and he mispronounces her name deliberately. And actually, his team are telling him that this is really bad politics. You're more likely to alienate centre ground voters by doing so. And they're asking him to stick to the policy issues. But he's not great on detail on policy questions. So he prefers to go on the personal attacks, and that's probably contributing towards him losing support in the opinion polls. There's some people say that actually he's lost his focus, he's lost his mojo, he's lost his energy, and the speculation that he's suffering from PTSD, or maybe actually he's just missing Biden as an opponent. He keeps referring to Biden, even though Biden isn't any longer in the race, almost as if he would like to be running against Biden rather than Harris. He seems unable to actually get to terms with the fact that he's dealing with someone 20 years younger and who is black and Asian and female. He seems to be wrong-footed by that. So it's interesting. Even the Wall Street Journal are criticising the Republicans and saying maybe they have the wrong candidate. They have a really good case to make, but actually this candidate, for once, doesn't seem to be doing it for them.
Well, Kamala, she's what is she best known for in terms of her political leanings?
Well, I mean, she comes from a background as a prosecutor in California, where she was most famous perhaps for opposing the death penalty. That's part of her political background, which was highly controversial, of course, in the American context. And she is someone who many people argue that she was adopted onto the ticket following the George Floyd episode in Minnesota, and therefore she is someone who is there to balance the ticket rather than to be at the front of the ticket. And many people are speculating that she may not be as good in debates or indeed on the stump. And of course, famously, she hasn't given any interviews, one-to-one interviews. She's relying on rallies rather than anything else. So a lot of people are saying that there's a honeymoon period here, but actually when it comes down to later stages in the campaign, when she's put on the spot, whether she can maintain that lead is an open question. But others are saying that actually the momentum's with her, and Trump similarly actually isn't able to focus and isn't able to actually give good accounts of himself and detailed policy terms compared to her. So it's an interesting narrowing of the race, and it really is anyone's to play for with 3 months to go.
It is quite interesting, isn't it? And I wonder, so what's your predictions on it? And if you were to be a betting man, who would you say you believe would win this?
A betting person wouldn't want to spend any money on this because it's really too close to call. Actually, what we've seen in the last 4 to 8 weeks is a huge turnaround in these things. I mean, who could have predicted a candidate dropping out, an assassination attempt, the Democratic Party not actually having a process whereby they went for the best candidate, but instead just going with what they had, the heir apparent, even though many people had concerns about that, and then her actually using that sense of momentum and energy and newness and freshness, gaining hugely in the polls.
Listen, we've got it, David. We're running out of time. We do have to go. David Dunn, very good. On the way, my monologue on knife crime. Now, though, your weather with Amy Bokata.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Sunny spells continuing through Sunday with a couple of showers further north, but it is all change as we move into Monday with some rain arriving. And that's from these frontal systems out in the Atlantic. But first, we do have a ridge of high pressure firmly across at least the southern half of the UK. It's having quite a settled afternoon. So plenty of sunshine around. There is some cloud around, but that'll generally start to melt away through this evening. But further north, we do start to see the beginning of these frontal systems, bringing some cloud and some rain across northwest Scotland. We also do see some drizzly showers moving into the southwest for southwest and parts of Wales as well. Cool though ahead of this, temperatures down into single figures in some eastern parts, and there may be a few mist and fog patches to start the day on Monday too. And fairly bright and sunny if you're starting the day in the far northeast of Scotland, but it is already going to be quite a cloudy picture with quite persistent rain. Some of this quite heavy at times, particularly in western parts as well. Northern Ireland seeing a very cloudy start to the day, rain already very close by and quite drizzly conditions. Wales and the southwest holding on to these very drizzly showers moving through this morning, but the central and southeastern half of England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday and quite a pleasant morning. But it won't last too long. We're going to see this cloud and rain steadily moving westwards. We're going to see drizzle and rain ahead of it, and then heavy rain arriving into the afternoon. Strong southerly winds as well, particularly through the Irish Sea, where we could see some gales as well. But ahead of that, warm and humid air, and we could still get 26 degrees in the far east of England, but cooler underneath this rain at best into the teens. And we do have a rain warning out as well. There could be some very difficult driving conditions with the strong wind and spray on the road as we head through the evening for southwest Scotland. Unsettled then as we head through the rest of the week with some particularly wet and windy weather across the north on Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours, but time is ticking. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dewbs Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now, including the Home Secretary's new crackdown on extremism. Do you believe clapping for the NHS put them on a pedestal? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. It's understood over 20 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and Lebanon. Iran-backed Hezbollah has continued firing rockets in retaliation. It comes as Israel's Prime Minister expressed cautious optimism about a ceasefire deal with Hamas, including the release of hostages. The militant group isn't present for the talks, but senior officials claim there's been no progress in reaching a deal. Meanwhile, President Biden claims he's remaining optimistic that an agreement is closer than ever. There are concerns that the safety of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is deteriorating after a drone strike. It caused an explosion just outside the site's protected area, although no casualties have been reported. The facility, the largest of its kind in Europe, has been occupied by Russian soldiers since the early stages of the war. It comes as Ukraine's incursion continues into Russian territory. Former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chip Chapman, says British-donated equipment is helping Ukraine push back Vladimir Putin.
One of the things that the offensive does is establish momentum and initiative and gives more willingness to continue to support Ukraine, because what you can say previously is that they were losing slowly, and initially the provision of support equalised the battlefield, and now at least the momentum and initiative is with them in a tactical sense.
In other news, a biotech firm that produces an Mpox vaccine is ramping up production after a new strain was found in Europe. The Clade 1b strain has been confirmed in Sweden after first being detected in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's believed to be the most dangerous version of the disease so far. Official figures reveal almost 500 people crossed the English Channel yesterday. At least 9 small boats made the journey following 2 days of no reported migrant arrivals. It brings the total number of migrants reaching UK waters so far this year to 19,000. The Home Office insists it's creating a new border security command to tackle the problem. The Home Secretary is launching a major crackdown on misogyny, saying it will be treated as a form of extremism. Yvette Cooper has ordered a review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how best to tackle threats posed by harmful ideologies. The analysis will look at hatred of women as one of the ideological trends that the government says is gaining traction. In Northern Ireland, a convicted murderer who was on the run has now been apprehended after an urgent manhunt. David McCord was sentenced to life in prison in 2004 for the murder of his girlfriend. Over the weekend, police worked to trace his whereabouts. He was considered unlawfully at large and issued an appeal for the prisoner to turn himself in. Police located McCord in the Belfast area and he's been returned to prison. A don't swim alert's been issued for a popular Devon seaside town because of a sewage leak. South West Water says it can't keep up with the spill caused by a burst pipe at a nearby pumping station in Exmouth. It's apologised and insists engineers are working around the clock to fix the problem. It comes after the regulator Ofwat announced water bills will rise an average of £94 over the next 5 years, and that's to cover the cost of upgrading Victorian-age infrastructure. It was also revealed that the 3 water companies, not including South West Water, are facing a combined fine of £168 million for failings including over sewage treatment. And Donald Trump went on the attack at a campaign event in Pennsylvania last night, twice telling supporters he was better looking than his election rival. His opponent, Kamala Harris, is planning a bus tour starting in Pittsburgh today. The former president was delivering a speech focused on the economy when he asked supporters if they'd mind if he went off script. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Knife crime. It's rampant in this country, with over 50,000 offences in the past year. Since the horrendous, heartbreaking Southport attack, where 3 beautiful defenceless children were brutally killed, there's been a litany of other attacks. Only the other day, we had an apparent attempted murder on an 11-year-old tourist in Leicester Square, which, had it not been for the quick thinking and the actions of this hero, 29-year-old Abdullah, who works at the tea shop near where the attack took place, we would be adding this poor soul and potentially her mother to the death tally. On Thursday, a 53-year-old man was stabbed to death in Luton. And this week, the families of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates have been fighting for justice after the killing of their family members. A review published by the Care Quality Commission, or CQC, on Tuesday regarding the case found a series of errors, omissions and misjudgments by mental health services. A litany of errors basically allowed a knowingly dangerous, mentally ill, sick man to roam the streets without any serious supervision. In a statement, the victims' families said that the organisations involved must bear a heavy burden of responsibility. Remember Nottingham Carnival last year? Youths actually running through the streets in Sadiq Khan's London, brazenly carrying zombie knives and machetes. How can you even be allowed to buy these things, let alone get away with carrying them openly? It's frightening. Well, one answer to all of this, you'll need to take a seat for this one. Police are asking owners of zombie knives and machetes to hand them back in exchange and give them, the holder of such an object, the market value as compensation if they turn them in before the knives are banned on September the 24th this year. When you're having a laugh, you heard it here, folks. Cash for knives. You couldn't make it up. The police are going to be giving out cash in exchange. Now, I get that maybe the idiots that purchase these things are potentially of low IQ. Perhaps some may be mentally challenged, and to carry one of these weapons, most are scared. But why pay for them to hand them back if caught after the ban, the punishment should be the deterrent? Surely an amnesty before the deadline with no compensation should suffice. After all, they're not being bought for fun. I mean, why would you want one? These knives are usually over 8 inches long, with serrated blades and often with some sort of arty graffiti emblazoned. The ban was put in place by the previous Conservative government, one of the very few things they actually completed. And if you own one of these knives, then you've got from the 26th of August until midnight on the 23rd of September to hand it in and claim your compo. But you'll need to provide a receipt. Without that, you'll only be entitled to a tenner. Honestly. Apparently, handing out compensation is standard practice, but because the knives were legal before the ban. But in what clown world do we live in where knives like that were ever allowed? Right, 8 minutes after 4 o'clock. Before we get stuck into debates, here's what else is coming up today. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper announced a new crackdown on extremism, pledging to tackle harmful ideologies and addressing gaps with current policies. But should misogyny be treated as terrorism? Then are Labour's policies a false economy, scrapping the winter fuel payment for pensioners, minimum service levels repealed for strikes, and private schools at risk of closure due to the VAT that will be charged next year? Has the Prime Minister got any answers? Then former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has laid out the 10 top principles for the future of the Conservatives. One of them should be get back to work, as he looks to crack down and get the party back on track, including functional NHS, seeing an end to mass migration and a total prison overhaul. All of that coming up. As ever, get your thoughts, post your comments, gbnews.com/your say. Right, so joining me today, a former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, and also former Labour advisor, James Schneider. Smile, James, it might never happen. Oh, maybe it has. Right, I want to ask you your thoughts. OK, so knife crime. Handing back a knife. We're going to give you money if you give back a knife. I mean, this is the beginning of a policy. This is what they're going to do. I just beg his belief that that's actually a thing.
It does beg a belief. It sends out all the wrong signals. I know in the capital city here in London, knife amnesty bins were often around. You can find them around kind of churches and youth clubs, and that, to a degree, makes a little bit of sense. I get it, and you can just drop it off. But to actually incentivise people and kind of reward, and I know they were technically legal when they got them, but to reward people who have purchased zombie knives, which is a very specific type, is complete insanity, sends out all the wrong signals. I have to say, I work quite closely with Sean Bailey, who was the Conservative candidate here in London, and, he would have been, on this issue, a breath of fresh air for the City of London, and it could have been, his absolute, zero tolerance kind of, targeting would have been a breath of fresh air. Places like London, with Sadiq Khan's kind of,
well, he's scared. I mean, he's scared. He said he's scared.
You have to have difficult conversations. You have to be you have to be so tough on it. It is genuinely scary, and it does link to the debate that we had. It's the two people who were stabbed in Leicester Square.
Terrible.
They were women. So all these, so you hear Yvette Cooper talking tough on language. OK, fine. But actually, should we not be absolutely doing everything we can to get, knives out of people's hands? Because there is a feeling, and wrongly or rightly, and I know the media have a role and these things get slightly... But there will be a feeling in certain communities of slightly lawlessness in this sense. We just see it. You see videos of people just wandering around the streets with these zombie knives.
Well, I mean, Nottingham Carnival, they were running through the streets with the knives as if it was just like nothing. No, we're just it's like, what?
Yeah.
James?
Yeah, it's really good that these weapons, which are extremely dangerous, are being banned, and it will be illegal to sell them and to buy them. I don't think it sounds sensible to buy them off people. I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a whole wealth of evidence that shows that actually this is a really good thing and it's been tried in other countries and it works, but on the face of it, it seems completely unnecessary. It's like, you have this offensive weapon that we think is an offensive weapon. We don't think they should be sold because their only use is causing suffering or fear, or you don't necessarily have to use the thing, you could just frighten someone with it, but it's not a good thing. And so people should get rid of them and pay the cost of having bought one in the first place. Of course, if there's some evidence which suggests it's actually, for the reasons that we can't understand, a really good thing, then OK, I would listen to that. In terms of the broader issues with youth crime and knife crime, I think we should be looking at, yes, the tough things like banning these knives and making sure that they're not in people's hands, or they're harder to get into people's hands. And then also looking at other things which we've got rid of, basically, over the last 14 years, like neighbourhood policing, like having a regular police officer that knows the area, that people in that area knows them, that the criminal justice system isn't so, stark black and white, that there is someone who can put a hand on someone's shoulder and say, watch out, we know that you're starting to misbehave, speak to family, speak to community. Also, all those things, boxing clubs, kids' youth centres, which have all been cut back. And if we're going to talk about the tough stuff, we also need to talk about the soft stuff that goes with it, because otherwise you've just got more people who are potentially going to either be killed or kill someone, or seriously injure themselves.
Because you're actually doing them a favour by telling them, hand it back and we won't be in trouble up till the 24th of September.
Yeah.
After that, you will be in trouble for possessing it. That is the deal. There's no extra bonus for bringing it back on time before.
It's the wrong messaging, and when, you accompany that with you know, a lot of people would deem, you know, quite soft policing on stuff like this, on knife crime, which is why we see the instances that we do see. It's just another kind of, it's another additional point where people just look at it and go, we're not actually, as a country, we're not actually taking this particularly seriously.
I don't think they are at all. They're not seeing... It's almost like knives are not that bad. These knives are very bad. They are scary to look at. They're like the length of your arm. Why? It's like a pirate's knife.
And banning them does work. I mean, one thing we're very lucky about in Britain is that we have very low levels of gun crime because guns have basically never been...
Because we have knives.
Well, no. The reason why there's knife crime is because there isn't gun crime.
Yeah, that's right.
And we don't have large levels of gun crime because there aren't lots of guns around. It's very hard to get hold of a gun. It's illegal, and so on and so forth. If you do the same thing with these really horrific types of knives, it should reduce the amount.
I would do that for knives and crossbows. There's no...
The crossbow as well, yeah. Those case a couple of weeks ago.
It's horrendous. You'd absolutely need some form of licence to own such a thing, if it were a crossbow, because I know that there are... Some people use them for performative reasons, and I know a woman who stands on her hands and she can do things with a crossbow, and I don't know. I don't know why.
She can get a special licence for standing on her head and shooting the crossbow with her feet or whatever.
But there should be licence for something like that if there is some sort of reason, but there's no reason to possess a zombie knife. Anyway, what do you think? GBNews.com/your say. 15 minutes after 4 o'clock, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, are Labour's policies a false economy?
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Sunday with Michael Portillo. From 11, only on GB News.
Joined now by the founder of Quintet London, Tanta Masulishvili, who channels her experience and fervour for fashion into her innovative brands, which produce artworks on silk. You brought in some lovely things, which we'll discuss in just a moment. Tell me a little bit about the complexity of printing an artist's idea onto silk. Is that a difficult thing to do?
It's actually very simple, because we just simply ask our clients a set of questions to find out what they like, their experiences, their favorite objects, or anything they desire. We create out of this information preliminary sketch, show it to clients until it's perfect. We change it according to their needs.
Are you saying that everything that you're doing here is personalised to a client? It's a commission from a client?
Every single piece is totally unique. We make each individual piece for the client taste. So every single piece is totally different. And what is nice, for example, we do like wedding favors, corporate gifts, investors' gifts, and every single time we would match the theme throughout to the actual company theme and so on.
Now, here we have a series of little silk ties. Am I right to call them ties?
This one's actually called twillies. Twilly.
Yes. I didn't know the word twilly.
Yes.
These have a name. So this is the name of your client in this case. This one is Amanda, I think.
Exactly. So actually, these are our signature design. So if you want to give someone something quickly, but just simply add their names, you can order from our website, and you just simply need to insert their name, and we can produce it on your favorite color combination. But then, obviously, our main product is totally unique pieces which are bespoke.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, 19 minutes after 4 o'clock. If you just tuned in, where have you been? No, welcome. Sorry, this is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. You can also stream the show live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. Now, remember to vote in my poll as well on X. I'm asking, will Labour's plan to crack down on hateful beliefs threaten free speech? So please vote in there. We'll see what the outcome is at the end of the show. But right now, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are Labour's policies a false economy? Let's start with some of them. We can address those. Labour plans to repeal the Strikes Act, which could lead to more frequent and disruptive industrial action without guaranteed service levels during the strike. And that's what the focus is on there, removing minimum or guaranteed service levels. And at the same time, the cuts to winter fuel payments are expected to hit the most vulnerable. That is one of their plans. They're going to cut the pensions winter fuel, particularly older pensioners who do not claim pension credit. This could effectively reduce their income by 3.3%. And then we've got Labour's proposal to impose 20% VAT on private schools, which risk many schools closing and then putting other pupils back into the state sector, which does not have the capacity to absorb the influx. So are these policies sustainable, or are they short-term fixes with long-term costs? The Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are Labour's policies a false economy? Well, joining me now, former editor of The Labour is Peter Edwards. Peter, thank you very much for joining me. He's the former advisor to... Oh, no, you're not the former advisor to Boris Johnson. Of course you're not. Right, so let's do this, Peter. Let's stick with the three policies for now, and then we can add other stuff in if you like. OK, let's start with the... should we start with the winter fuel allowance? Everyone's talking about that.
Well, the new government has a mandate. The deficit is over £80 billion a year, and they've got to make some savings. And Jeremy Hunt, the former Tory Chancellor, said whoever won the election would have had to have made savings and tax cuts. So Labour has set out why they're doing it. And of course, you'll remember, and I'm sure you've covered it, there are many millions of middle-class households who were receiving a payment of £200 or £300. It's age-dependent, varies once you pass the age of 80. Who didn't need it. That's not to take away from pensioner poverty, which is a very serious issue, and why we have pension credit, which works as a top-up on your income. But why would we pay the winter fuel allowance at a time of great fiscal pressure to households that don't require it?
Listen, Peter, that's all very well, but a lot of people, the majority of people probably are claiming it and do need it. So for the very few, very wealthy pensioners who don't need it, I doubt it will amount to the amount that they're expecting. And the other line is, the problem here is that those people will then go on and claim pension credit. And I think on that will cost the Labour Party more. And I think it was that they're likely to be, it would cost them about £4 billion, as opposed to costing them about 1.3 or 4 billion, I think it was.
Well, anyone who's concerned about inequality, which is certainly me and probably most of the Labour Party, wants the maximum number of people to claim pension credit, because if you're a poorer person, you have access to benefits, and if you're not taking them up and you've paid in your whole life, then that's very sad, and you wouldn't want someone to suffer financially and in terms of heating and eating because they don't have all the facts they need to claim what's owed to them. So I actually want to see pension credit claimed legitimately to the maximum, but by the poorest people rather than the middle classes claiming a benefit which they may not need.
There's always this assumption that the middle classes are wealthy. It's just not even true, and in particular when it comes to social care later on. But let's move to VAT on private schools, and we've got about a minute on that one. With regard to that, where do you sit with that?
Oh, well, I support the policy. A minute's not very long to cover it. But if you think about other types of business and other types of services that are subject to VAT, why would independent schools be exempt? And if something is exempt from a tax that is elsewhere in the free market economy, then it's ordinary folk like me and you subsidising that.
It's not quite true, is it? Because I'd pay. Think of the price for each pupil as about £7,500 that we will pay through our taxes, and then obviously, if our child is not going there, then we are then paying for a private school. I would say that arguably that I deserve some sort of subsidy. Listen, I'm running out of time. I've got to go, Peter Edwards. A pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. Right, well, that's Peter's thoughts. What are you? What are yours? What are you? What are you? Joining me now, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, and former Labour advisor, James Schneider. James Schneider, coming to you first. A couple of those policies, we listed three. We'll stick with those for now, because those are the ones that we know they're planning to initiate. The winter fuel allowance.
Yeah, cutting that's a big mistake. And there's... in part of the Labour Party, especially the kind of Blairite bit of the Labour Party, there's this obsession with means testing, which means exactly as Peter said, you have to have all the information available. So if people know exactly what they're entitled to, they know how to fill in the forms, then they can get everything that they should get. Versus universal things, which covers everybody. And the idea is, if you are a higher earner or you have more money and you're getting it, you're paying that back in your taxes overall. So it reduces the inefficiency of having to have a means testing system, and you don't get cases where people who really need something but they don't know basically how to fill in the forms in order to get the support. So I think that policy is a big mistake, and it's basically because there was this big black hole in the public finances which we knew about. We knew about in the election campaign, just neither party wanted to talk about it, and nor did the media. Then straight afterwards we find out it's there, and there you can see the choices. And the choices you could have to fill that would be, you could either, for example, have a wealth tax of the very wealthiest people in their financial assets, and you could protect other things. Politics is about choices, and the choices that have been made here aren't a very good one.
OK, Oscar, on that.
I think Labour kind of economic policy at the moment is a complete mess. I mean, they're fortunate they don't have a real Conservative party in opposition at the moment. So stuff like the winter fuel allowance, you know, they can just kind of whack it through. Doesn't really, there's no real opposition. And I know I'm not talking about the numbers in Parliament. I mean, we don't. I mean, yes, Rishi Sunak is still technically, but we don't have a true voice to take that on. It's a complete mess. It was kind of always going to be. You're seeing the stifling of ambition. We all have, you know, with the VAT on private schools, we have this image of, you know, the Eton lads, you know, like, no, this is actually about, you know, working class, middle class. Keir Starmer is unable to define what a working person is, by the way.
Well, he did.
It's incredibly cringe watching him trying to do that. But these are people, these are families who absolutely work tooth and nail in the name of ambition and embetterment and getting their kids that private education. OK, so, you know, a mess has been created there from a Labour perspective. And the other thing that people, I think, are going to get really sick and tired of, particularly if taxes start going up here and there, is that and it's slightly strategically sensible for the time being, I'll give them that, but pointing at things and saying, oh, it's so much worse than we ever thought it would be. Oh, the Conservative mess
they all
this.
Do that, don't they?
It's like,
Every party,
you're in government now.
Every
and actually
does that when they come into power. It's not just
I get it, but when you see growth figures like last week slightly improving, when you see inflation slightly improving, that's also going to slightly ring a little bit deaf on a few people, particularly on top of all of this, when they're having to, they're also talking very hard on austerity. It just doesn't match up. It doesn't make sense. It's a mess. It's going for growth 1 minute, and you know there was a huge plinth of their electoral campaign in the summer, and at the same time austerity. And I honestly, and I think I'm glad that we agree on this, James. I think the winter fuel stuff is it's horrific and it's unnecessary.
Well, look, I'll say he did actually define working person. I'll just read it to you. This is his definition on LBC. He said, people who earn their living, he said, who rely on our public services and don't really have the ability to write a cheque when they get into trouble. Sorry, I was struggling with that. I didn't really... nobody writes cheques anymore. Anyway...
But how would he define the middle class / working class family who are battling, as I said, to get their kids to a good private school and spending so much of their time and money on achieving that? So
well, he's one of them because his dad was a toolmaker, you know. James, on VAT on private schools, Oscar's made some very good points, I think.
Yeah, I mean, here I support the policy. I don't think that we should be subsidising private schools, and that's what it is. It's ending the subsidy. You have VAT on most things, and private schools had this exemption, and now they don't, and that money will go into education for everybody. That seems like a perfectly sensible, small-scale reform. I mean, the thing I would say about the three policies you've picked up, they're all pretty small scale in terms of numbers relative to the economic issues that we're.
But little things add up to be the big.
No, sorry, I'm not criticising you for your selection. That's all you have to choose from.
That's what we got. That's what we've done. That's
right.
What we've done
No, I agree. But this is my point: is we're coming in with a new government after 14 years, where most people's living standards are lower and public services are in a worse state, and the macro global economic outlook is not very positive. And even if you support all three of these policies, they don't add up to they don't touch the sides to deal with what's going on. They don't touch the sides to deal with...
The point that we're making is that if this is just what they do to things that only literally don't touch the sides, God help us when they're dealing with the actual
In fairness,
sides.
me and James in the green room beforehand, we were saying they do not at this moment in time, and yeah, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt because it has, you know, they haven't been in long enough, but they don't have an overarching vision or strategy. And if they're just over time going to talk about, yeah, we're going for growth, never going to explain to you how the hell we're going to do that. Yeah, we're going to raise taxes here, we're going to pick something off here, you know, X, Y, Z. People, the electorate will get incredibly frustrated.
Well, it's like they're offending small bunches of people one at a time. So you've now upset all the pensioners. Now you're upsetting a lot of people who worked really hard, who are working people, actually, who have worked very hard to send their kids to private school. And obviously the schools are... many of them are closing. Some of them are closing already. We've had 2 schools close. And a lot of the pupils, a lot of the state sector is actually full. So they've not actually put anything in the state sector to accommodate for these new pupils that are now entering it. The plan was for that one to raise, I think it was 1.6 billion or 1.7 billion, and the overall education budget is about 116 billion. But that relies on a certain percentage of those kids still at those schools. And as those kids pull away, the amount they're going to make is becoming less and less. And even the OBR were looking at this policy and saying, look, if it doesn't raise the money, then you really should stop it.
Well, it's, as I say, it's a pretty small policy. I support it. It's a pretty
small policy.
I mean, to be clear, I completely support it. I think it's a very sensible thing to remove that subsidy and put the money into the rest.
Private school?
Yeah, I did, and I think that my parents who made that decision, not me, should have not received a subsidy to do that. I think that money should have gone back into the rest of the education system.
They did not get a subsidy for doing that. They're already paying for something.
Well, they did. When they paid for everything else, they were paying VAT. When they paid for this, they didn't pay VAT. That's a subsidy.
I don't believe that becomes a subsidy. I actually think ultimately what should happen is that they should be given some sort of benefit for spending, first of all, the $7,500 which will come out of their income for other people's kids, and then also for paying all that money to send their own child to school as well. They're actually paying twice. That's what I see.
I think as a government, if you're not if you're stifling ambition, and at the same time you're not protecting, you know, those who are, old age pensioners, you get into a really sticky wicket there, because at both ends of the spectrum, as you said, you're kind of hacking people off. And I know these are small things, and it's August, and it's a new government. There isn't a real opposition to properly take it on at the moment. But if this is a pattern that emerges, they will really start to hack people off.
And they might be small things, but they have real-world consequences to those who they affect, in particular the children. And they're starting that policy in the middle of the school year rather than the beginning, which makes no sense.
And it's slightly shape-shifty as well, because to be fair, as someone who worked for Corbyn, lump it or like it or lump it, you know what that ideology is, and there's a belief system behind it. This is just tinkering around the edges.
Well, you've heard what they're saying, and it does sound to me like politics then me. But what do you think? GBNews.com/your say. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online, and on digital radio. Coming up, what does the future hold for the Conservative Party? As Robert Jenrick reveals his top 10 priorities. Maybe one of those could be perhaps get involved in what's going on in the political scene right now instead of, navel-gazing. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia.
Nana, thank you. It's 4:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour. It's understood at least 24 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza overnight, including some women and children. It comes as the Israeli Prime Minister says he's cautiously optimistic about a potential ceasefire. However, a senior Hamas representative says any deal is still a way off. In Ukraine, safety at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is deteriorating, according to International Atomic Energy Agency. An explosive detonated just outside the site's protected area, which has been occupied by Russian soldiers since the early stages of the war. Official figures show 9 migrant boats were brought ashore from the English Channel yesterday, carrying almost 500 people. Hundreds more have made the crossing this week, bringing the total number reaching UK waters so far this year to 19,000. The Home Secretary is launching a major crackdown on misogyny, saying it will be treated as a form of extremism. Yvette Cooper has ordered a review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how best to tackle threats posed by harmful ideologies. The analysis will look at hatred of women as one of the ideological trends that the government says is gaining traction. A don't swim alert's been issued for Exmouth Beach in Devon after South West Water admitted it was struggling to contain a sewage leak. The firms apologise for a burst pipe and insist engineers are working around the clock to fix the problem. And Donald Trump went on the attack at a campaign event in Pennsylvania last night, twice telling supporters he was better looking than his election rival. The former president was delivering a speech focused on the economy when he asked supporters if they'd mind if he went off script.
I'm a better looking person than Kamala. No, I couldn't.
His opponents planning a bus tour starting in Pittsburgh today. Americans head to the polls in November. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Sunny spells continuing through Sunday with a couple of showers further north, but it has all changed as we move into Monday with some rain arriving. And that's from these frontal systems out in the Atlantic. But first, we do have a ridge of high pressure firmly across at least the southern half of the UK. It's having quite a settled afternoon. So plenty of sunshine around. There is some cloud around, but that'll generally start to melt away through this evening. But further north, we do start to see the beginning of these frontal systems, bringing some cloud and some rain across northwest Scotland. We also do see some drizzly showers moving into the southwest for southwest and parts of Wales as well. Cool though ahead of this, temperatures down into single figures in some eastern parts, and there may be a few mist and fog patches to start the day on Monday too. And fairly bright and sunny if you're starting the day in the far northeast of Scotland, but it is already going to be quite a cloudy picture with quite persistent rain, some of this quite heavy at times, particularly in western parts as well. Northern Ireland seeing a very cloudy start to the day, rain already very close by and quite drizzly conditions. Wales and the southwest holding on to these very drizzly showers moving through this morning, but the central and southeastern half of England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday and quite a pleasant morning. But it won't last too long. We're going to see this cloud and rain steadily moving westwards. We're going to see drizzle and rain ahead of it, and then heavy rain arriving into the afternoon. Strong southerly winds as well, particularly through the Irish Sea, where we could see some gales as well. But ahead of that, warm and humid air, and we could still get 26 degrees in the far east of England, but cooler underneath this rain at best into the teens. And we do have a rain warning out as well. There could be some very difficult driving conditions with the strong wind and spray on the road as we head through the evening for southwest Scotland. Unsettled then as we head through the rest of the week with some particularly wet and windy weather across the north on Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have saved Storm. You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's 38 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, the second one of the hour. I'm asking, are the Tory party neglecting their brief? Robert Jenrick has laid out the top 10 principles for the future of the Conservatives as he looks to get the party back on track, warning that the Tories must rebuild far more quickly than after their previous landslide election defeat in 1997. And some of his top priorities include a fully functioning NHS, saying we must make it deliver, an end to illegal migration and a total prison overhaul. focusing on putting away repeat offenders for longer and to cut crime rates. And in principle, these are good, but can they actually deliver them? Does anyone really care? Joining me now is former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, also former Labour advisor James Schneider. As I want to come to you, Oscar, first of all, and ask you that question directly. Are they neglecting their brief?
I think the NHS in terms of sorry. I think look, the Tory party are. I think we described it again off air. It is inevitably a little bit navel-gazing at the moment. They're talking to. I mean, these candidates are literally talking to the people who ultimately would make them leader of the party. I think Rob Jenrick's stance on stuff. I think there's early momentum with him. His critics, and this is really interesting, his critics in the media, and they're always anonymous sources, and blah, 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 are saying he's quite chameleon-like in terms of all of a sudden he found these, right-wing virtues and, on immigration. Actually, that chameleon quality is often something that is actually in some ways what the party needs. And because you can look at it very negatively, but that's actually quite unifying. And actually for opponents and maybe a future, Keir Starmer across the dispatch box, if he is quite hard to pin down, that's quite a powerful thing in politics. I'd argue Keir Starmer has a similar quality to him. I think that this is a first public test.
Well, it's a quality in terms of the fact that he never seemed to answer a direct question, so he seemed to get away with never answering the questions. But for the electorate, it's a bad...
But he can marry. He has shown that one nation side to him, and, recently he's talking much tougher on things like immigration, and so there are parts of the party that could probably lend him a bit of trust. I think, however, and this is a more general challenge for the party, one, the country isn't really ready to listen to the Conservatives yet. They have to accept that. That takes humility. And secondly, this leadership contest, they have to get it right. They have to do it again with humility. And have to
get on with it.
Exactly. Get on with it. Do it sensibly. Do it calmly. Because if we fail this test as a party...
It's over.
It's over, and it could be quite, even in the short term, getting this contest all wrong and it looks unprofessional, can be quite embarrassing.
It's all right. Well, I don't know how much more embarrassment you can get.
Well, quite.
James.
Well, no one's really paying attention, which tells you almost what you need to know about it. After 14 years of government and, to be honest, probably the worst 14 years we've been governed in terms of people's pay and living standards and services, I think Oscar's right. They'll need some humility, but they also do. I mean, from a basic politics point of view, they need to be clear about what they're from and what they're for and what their dividing lines are. And maybe it's because it seems like it's only taking place in the pages of the Telegraph and nowhere else. This leadership campaign at the moment, I'm not really seeing it, but I haven't seen what the different candidates stand for, what marks them out as a different option relative to Keir Starmer, and then from a Tory point of view, I imagine you've got the elephant in the room, which is you've got the Conservative Party and you've got Reform, and if they are divided going into the next election, then they won't win. And if they come together in some kind of way... Well, either the voters or the parties.
If Keir Starmer carries on with this stuff that he's doing, he might hemorrhage...
But, for example, in the election, in the 2019 election, when the Conservatives won, Reform voters voted for the Conservatives. In 2024, Reform voters didn't vote for the Conservatives. They voted for Reform. The Conservatives fell back massively and lost, an epic number of seats.
UKIP.
What? Sorry.
UKIP voters.
Whatever.
Reform didn't exist. I'm just, they were UKIP voters, wasn't it?
No, I mean in 2024 they voted.
It's this one.
Yeah, in this one, the one that we just had, and also you can see the difference between 2015 and 2017. In 2015 there were, I can't remember the number, but it might have been 4 million people who voted UKIP, something like that. By 2017, those had all cohered within the Conservative Party. So they need to have a strategy that is able to look in both directions, look to how they can cohere the right and to look out to the country, which requires some political skill. And from the ones that I've seen so far, I can't really see any of them doing it at the moment.
There are enough voters for all of these parties to exist. And I would argue that the brief of Reform is not the same as the brief of the Conservatives, because the Conservatives are not towards the right at all. In fact, I would say that they are more like Liberal Democrats and they are close to the left. So I think they are.
I love how we're always saying, no, the representatives of our side, they've got nothing to do with this. I'm saying, no, this is a centre-right Labour government. You're saying, oh, yeah, Rishi Sunak, he's a left-winger. Boris Johnson, basically a communist, you know.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as
what I think a lot of Conservatives, and let's not forget, and this might sound like a controversial thing to say, but it shouldn't be, by and large, the United Kingdom is a small C Conservative country. So the votes are there. James doesn't like that at all. No,
completely disagree.
He thinks we're a communist country.
We're a small C Conservative country in terms of our values, generally speaking. So the people are out there, the votes are there. It can be very, very doom and gloom to be a Conservative right now, but I think what a lot of people want these leaders to leadership candidates to eventually get to a place of is the Labour Party in 2019 were decimated. And it was a really, really tough election for them. They had a good one in 2017, and the wheels did fall off. And look at it now. Politics is a little bit more volatile at the moment, and so a leader, once they can let the membership and the general public think, I can unify this party. I think we want to see the vision. I want to see the vision, at least. That actually, you know what? Next election, we can win it.
Yeah, well, that may well be the case, but right now we have issues, and the Conservative Party are not talking about them. They're navel-gazing about who the leader will be. Yeah. And even though they have, 124 seats or something like that, why they are not engaging in politics, and Rishi Sunak, the leader of the Conservative Party right now, is off somewhere in America. I guess I do get it that it's the recess and a lot of them but... I think the country needs some sort of opposition or some sort of something else, not just the Labour Party just literally doing whatever they want, which they can effectively do, but still, we want to hear something.
Well, that is our system. I mean, I think our system should change, but that is our system. Labour have got an absolute enormous majority and can do near enough what they like, and Keir Starmer has a pretty free hand. The issue is, what is he going to do with it? And from everything that we've seen so far, it's a pretty... I mean, in fact, I think the analysis showed it was the smallest manifesto in terms of tax and spend changes that there have been for many of the major parties for decades. So you've got a government with a huge majority, with a small programme, and that's where the political space is. I think, both nominally to its left and to its right, to give some kind of alternative. And if the Conservative Party isn't doing it, something to its right will. And I think
just to come in
quickly,
we
20 seconds.
We get very, very obsessed about right, left, and elections have to be won, in the centre ground. Ian Duncan Smith put it very, very well quite recently. It's actually the common ground. That's what we have to focus on as a Conservative Party.
Yeah, you need to focus on common sense, and I think that you'll win. That will win hands down. Right, well, what do you think? GBNews.com/your say. I will read some of those in just a moment. Coming up in the next hour, my interview, I'll be speaking to Emma Webber. She's the mother of Nottingham attack victim Barnaby Webber. You will not want to miss that. Stay tuned.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
Have we reached a tipping point in the gender wars? So 6 years ago, comedy writer Graham Linehan, the man who created hit sitcoms such as Father Ted and Black Books, was cancelled for standing up for the rights of women. But have things actually got any better? Well, I'm delighted to say that Graham Linehan joins me now. Just in case anyone's watching who doesn't know what happened to you, what happened?
Well, I just noticed women being bullied online and in physical space as well, and I started objecting to it. I immediately started losing work.
And this was just on Twitter or social media?
Yeah.
Just making that point?
Yeah, exactly. And then, I had what I thought was a bit of a kind of safety net in the Father Ted musical, which I saw as my pension.
Yes.
And finally that was taken away too by my spineless colleagues, I'm afraid.
I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? Because, Father Ted, one of the most famous sitcoms of all time, the musical, a surefire hit.
Yep.
Still hasn't been produced.
Yeah.
Still being held hostage by Hat-Trick Productions, who are the people who have the rights, yeah?
Yeah. It's because it's a combination of things. It's because they're terrified of activists. They have activists within the company, and they don't have enough interest in the women in their lives to investigate the issue.
Are they just afraid that it might happen to them as well?
I don't know. I think it's a combination of things.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of fear. I genuinely don't think they have enough curiosity or empathy with women to actually look into the issue. They seem to think that women's rights, as people like Alistair Campbell often say, are a culture war issue. And, you know, we've seen it reach its apex, really, in that this week, and for 10 days, I think it is, we've seen men hitting women, punching women in the boxing ring.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, welcome. It's just coming up to 10 minutes to 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget as well, you can stream the show live on YouTube. Right now, before the break, we were discussing Robert Jenrick's top principles for the future of the Conservatives. But are the parties neglecting their brief? Well, this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing today. I've got Dan Bryan in Hull. Dan Bryan, what do you think? The Conservative Party, are they neglecting their brief? I mean, I haven't heard anything really from them apart from who's going to lead it.
Well, exactly, and I've been saying this for a while now, that the Conservatives haven't been Conservative for many, many years. They've had 14 years to reduce the size of the state, and the state has grown. It interferes into our lives more than it ever has. They've had 14 years to do the levelling up thing that said they were going to do, and yet still there's this disparity between all the cities. And they, like Prince Harry and that woman, they look down the camera and lie through their teeth. And as a viewer watching them when they're in interviews, they just lie and lie and lie, and we're absolutely sick to the back teeth of it because they've had 14 years to implement these policies, and they never have.
Yeah, but some people might say that they do need to get the leadership and the candidate right, so they should take a bit of time on that. But in the meantime, can they not multitask?
Well, yes, but what have they been doing for the last 14 years is my point. Yes, we go through different leaders. Yes, they change. I mean, we've had 5 different leaders, haven't we, since 2010, given what was going on politically. So, yes, that does happen within parties, but there's no reason why the party itself can't actually stick to its principles of conservatism, small c conservatism, like what your guest was saying. I do believe this country is a small c conservative country. And many people on the right and many people on the left agree with those principles, and there is the votes there for it. However, nobody is there representing us.
Well, yeah, exactly. And Rishi Sunak is somewhere in LA in a 5-star Michelin restaurant. Thank you so much, Dan Bryan. Really good to talk to you. That's Dan Bryan. He's that great British voice. He's in Hull. What a lovely smile. Right, well, lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Let's see what you've been saying. Anne-Marie says, Nana, if misogyny is to be treated as extreme ideology, we were talking about misogyny, who gets to decide what is extreme and what the ideology is? I was the victim of abuse for years, and even I'm not sure whether he hates women in general or me in particular. Also, much violence is often learned behaviour, say a violent father or school bullies, which I would say is not a terrorist nature, as is suggested. There is no need to reclassify the crime. The laws and sentencing are there if only they would use them properly. Also, if this is reclassified, which group next? Pretty soon we could all be branded as terrorists for misgendering. I think this idea belongs in the well-intended but stupid idea pile. Thank you for that. That's right. Richard says, typical new Conservative. I don't want to hear their one nation party. I want a party that has the policies that the Conservatives used to tell us they had, and that is now reform. What else have we got? Oh, here we go. Catherine says, these people, regarding private schools, Catherine says these people that choose to send their kids to private schools free up space for the rest, so to lump that onto them is just pure jealousy. And very quickly, this one, if James's argument, this is from John, if James's argument were to be applied to the whole education sector, that would be payable on nursery school and university fees. Yes, very good point. Well, thank you so much for your comments. Keep them coming. gbnews.com/your say. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Next, the interview with Emma Webber. She's the mother of Nottingham attack victim Barnaby Webber. Please stay tuned for that one. That is on the way in a couple of moments' time. But first, let's get an update with your weather with Amy Bokata.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Sunny spells continuing through Sunday with a couple of showers further north, but it has all changed as we move into Monday with some rain arriving. And that's from these frontal systems out in the Atlantic. But first, we do have a ridge of high pressure firmly across at least the southern half of the UK. It's having quite a settled afternoon. So plenty of sunshine around. There is some cloud around, but that'll generally start to melt away through this evening. But further north, we do start to see the beginning of these frontal systems, bringing some cloud and some rain across northwest Scotland. We also do see some drizzly showers moving into the southwest for southwest and parts of Wales as well. Cool, though, ahead of this, temperatures down into single figures in some eastern parts, and there may be a few mist and fog patches to start the day on Monday too. And fairly bright and sunny if you're starting the day in the far northeast of Scotland, but it is already going to be quite a cloudy picture with quite persistent rain. Some of this quite heavy at times, particularly in western parts as well. Northern Ireland seeing a very cloudy start to the day, rain already very close by and quite drizzly conditions. Wales and the southwest holding on to these very drizzly showers moving through this morning, but the central and southeastern half of England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday and quite a pleasant morning. But it won't last too long. We're going to see this cloud and rain steadily moving westwards. We're going to see drizzle and rain ahead of it, and then heavy rain arriving into the afternoon. Strong southerly winds as well, particularly through the Irish Sea, where we could see some gales as well. But ahead of that, warm and humid air, and we could still get 26 degrees in the far east of England, but cooler underneath this rain at best into the teens. And we do have a rain warning out as well. There could be some very difficult driving conditions with the strong wind and spray on the road as we head through the evening for southwest Scotland. Unsettled then as we head through the rest of the week with some particularly wet and windy weather across the north on Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GB News Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes, she could have said, Storm, you made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio for the next hour. Me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now, including the Home Secretary's new crackdown on extremism. Do you believe that clapping for the NHS puts them on a pedestal? Joining me, Oscar Redrop and also James Schneider. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 5 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour. It's understood over 20 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and Lebanon. Iran-backed Hezbollah has continued firing rockets in retaliation. It comes as Israel's Prime Minister expressed cautious optimism about a ceasefire deal with Hamas, including for the release of hostages. The militant group isn't present for the talks, but as senior officials claimed there's been no progress in reaching a deal. Meanwhile, President Biden claims he's remaining optimistic that an agreement is closer than ever. And US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is due to arrive in Israel shortly in his latest effort to push for a ceasefire and hostage release deal. There are concerns that the safety of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is deteriorating after a drone strike. It caused an explosion just outside the site's protected area, although no casualties have been reported. The facility, the largest of its kind in Europe, has been occupied by Russian soldiers since the early stages of the war. It comes as Ukraine's incursion continues into Russian territory. Former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chip Chapman, says British-donated equipment is helping Ukraine push back Vladimir Putin.
One of the things that the offensive does is establish momentum and initiative and gives more willingness to continue to support Ukraine, because what you can say previously is that they were losing slowly, and initially the provision of support equalised the battlefield, and now at least the momentum and initiative is with them in a tactical sense.
In other news, a biotech firm that produces an Mpox vaccine is ramping up production after a new strain was found in Europe. The Clade 1b strain has been confirmed in Sweden after first being detected in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's believed to be the most dangerous version of the disease so far. Official figures reveal almost 500 people crossed the English Channel yesterday. At least 9 small boats made the journey, following 2 days of no reported migrant arrivals. It brings the total number of migrants reaching UK waters so far this year to 19,000. The Home Office insists it's creating a new border security command to tackle the problem. The Home Secretary is launching a major crackdown on misogyny, saying it will be treated as a form of extremism. Yvette Cooper has ordered a review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how best to tackle threats posed by harmful ideologies. The analysis will look at hatred of women as one of the ideological trends that the government says is gaining traction. In Northern Ireland, a convicted murderer who was on the run has now been apprehended after an urgent manhunt. David McCord was sentenced to life in prison in 2004 for the murder of his girlfriend. Over the weekend, police worked to trace his whereabouts. He was considered unlawfully at large and issued an appeal for the prisoner to turn himself in. Police located McCord in the Belfast area and he's been returned to prison. A don't swim alert's been issued for a popular Devon seaside town because of a sewage leak. South West Water says it can't keep up with the spill caused by a burst pipe at a nearby pumping station in Exmouth. It's apologised and insists engineers are working around the clock to fix the problem. It comes after the regulator Ofwat announced water bills will rise an average of £94 over the next 5 years to cover the cost of upgrading Victorian-age infrastructure. It was also revealed that 3 water companies, not including South West Water, are facing a combined fine of £168 million for failings, including over sewage treatment. And Donald Trump went on an attack at a campaign event in Pennsylvania last night, twice telling supporters he was better looking than his election rival. His opponent, Kamala Harris, is planning a bus tour starting in Pittsburgh today. The former president was delivering a speech focused on the economy when he asked supporters if they'd mind if he went off script.
I'm a better-looking person than Kamala. No, I couldn't believe it. She said, you know, I had never heard that one. We're not going to let this socialist lunatic, and she's a socialist lunatic, that's the other thing. Please, sir, please, don't call her a lunatic. I said, but that's what she is. She's a lunatic.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online, and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, and also former Labour advisor James Schneider. Still not smiling. Still to come, the Home Secretary's announced a new crackdown on extremism, pledging to tackle harmful ideologies and address gaps in the current policies. But should extreme misogyny be treated as terrorism? Then, for the interview, I'll be joined by Emma Webber, the mother of the victim of the tragic attack in Nottingham in June 2023. Stay tuned for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, do you believe clapping for the NHS put them on a pedestal? Our health ombudsman has warned that treating the NHS like a national religion during the pandemic may have had a dangerous repercussion. And as ever, send me your thoughts. Post your comments at gbnews.com/yoursay. So the government announced extreme misogyny will be treated as a form of extremism under new government plans. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says that there have been a rise in extremism both online and on our streets. And she'll review the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how best to deal with it. Well, GB News' reporter Ray Addison brought us this.
Well, the Home Office is calling this new initiative Sprint, and it's been described by the Home Secretary as a strategic reset on how government tackles harmful or hateful activity. Now, that could be online or it could be something that you've overheard in the street. Basically, it's anything that promotes violence or undermines democracy. And the Home Office is very keen to stress that they will be looking at things such as the rise of what they call the far right and also Islamist extremism here in the UK. However, what's really caught the attention of the public is this concept of the clampdown on extreme misogyny. Now, of course, that is the dislike, contempt or prejudice towards women and girls. Now, under these proposals, teachers could be legally required to refer pupils that they suspect of extreme misogyny to Prevent. Of course, that is the government organisation that tries to intervene and deal with young people who could be involved or getting involved in terrorism or extremism. And the hope is that by doing that, they will help to address violence against women and girls in society. Now, the public has been asking a number of questions related to this story. They're saying, well, who would define whether these comments are classed as misogynistic, who would define whether they are classed as extreme? And of course, there have been concerns, we've seen them in recent weeks, related to this term two-tier policing, depending upon what side of the argument somebody might find themselves on. This was a Labour manifesto commitment, so we shouldn't be surprised that it has been brought in. And the Home Secretary says it's badly needed because the government's countering extremism strategy has not been updated since 2015.
So, I'm asking, will Labour's plan to crack down on hateful beliefs threaten free speech? That is on X right now. Let's get the thoughts of social media expert Alan Stevens. Alan, a lot of people are pointing out... Welcome to the programme. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
A lot of people are pointing out that where is the line for extremism? And if that is the case, then is there a chance that ultimately what you'll end up doing is policing free speech?
Well, effectively, yes, that is a risk, Nana, because somebody's got to make a judgment on this. I mean, a lot of this is on social media, which is what I observe a great deal. And what does it mean if somebody looks at something, if somebody retweets a joke, for example? Could that be misogyny? I mean, there is a serious problem here. We do know that a quarter of 13 to 15-year-old boys see Andrew Tate in a positive light. He's currently awaiting charges, as we know, in Romania on various serious charges. So there is an issue here. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to make a judgment on it.
Well, that's the thing. But the question is, who's going to make that judgment? And will they be leaning more to the left perspective, which means that, as somebody pointed out on gbnews.com/yoursay, they pointed out that what if you misgender someone? That could suddenly be seen as some form of hate speech and extremism if you do not subscribe to the certain ideologies that are the accepted narratives of the day.
Well, you're right, of course. I mean, extremism literally means taking an extreme view, and having an extreme view doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. You could be just extreme about something. However, somebody needs to draw a line. I think what we need are some examples, and we need people to say, for example, this is misogynistic, this is not, this is hate speech, this is not, because people don't know where they are. And I think it's particularly true on social media with people retweeting or reposting content that they think is okay, and suddenly they find that they're the people in trouble.
Yeah, I think that's going a bit far. To me, that is extreme. If somebody retweets something in particular, because you don't know what's on the thread of that retweet, so it's difficult to then, you retweet one thing, but on the thread it could say something misogynistic, something hateful, and all this stuff. So I actually don't think that's fair. Someone retweets something, I think we need to just let it go, depending on how severe the retweet is. But again, here we are in the same place, working out what is allowed and what isn't. Do you think that perhaps... Sorry, go on.
No, go on. I mean, the thing is, we're always in the same boat, aren't we? That somebody's got to draw a line. Someone's got to make a judgment. Is retweeting a hateful post a hateful act in itself? Well, it certainly is if you add something to it, like I agree, or I endorse this, or I would say this is a good thing. But if you're retweeting it, it might be because you dislike it and you want your friends to comment on it. You're starting a debate. So we've got to be very careful how we police this.
Well, yeah, I think Elon Musk has taken away the ability for you to see who's liked what. I think he's done something like that, so you can't work out somebody that liked posts, which I think is fair, because a lot of people make a mistake. You read a post one time, then you go, oh, hang on, and then you've liked it, and then you may lose where you are, and that's not right. But so what, in your view, would be a better approach in terms of dealing with misogynistic content and people? Because there is a level... I have a level of agreement with Yvette Cooper in terms of radicalisation of people online, and I have a level of agreement with her that Andrew Tate is somebody who appears to be quite misogynistic and does appear to have sort of garnered a view of a lot of young people. So what do you think what would you propose as a different approach?
Well, I think we do need the approach. I think we need people to be policed. What I would suggest is that we have some examples. So obviously it takes a while to build up case law. Once you've built up case law, then you know where you are. But certainly, we're going to have to see some prosecutions. We're going to have to see some cases brought to court and judgments made about what is and what is not misogynistic. Because unless people see where that line is, it's going to be impossible for them to avoid stepping over it from time to time. So I think examples and case law are the way forward.
And in your view, then, are the policies or the reviews that Yvette Cooper is putting together, do you feel there's a level of really attack on free speech? Do you feel, because if you look at some of the other Labour Party policies, some of those things require, sorry, I've lost my train of thought now. Where was I going with that?
That's all right.
What are we talking about? Who are you? What's going on?
No,
Go on. Just tell me what you want.
I think, yes, to some extent, it could be seen as an attack on free speech. I mean, I don't want to get into the political left and right side of this, but nevertheless, there is a sense that people aren't allowed to say things that they want to say or things that they used to be able to say. And that doesn't mean that everything we said in the past was great. There were some terrible things that people said back in the day. But I think that there does need to be a certain amount of freedom, of latitude, of allowing people to make something clear, to say, without actually, they're not actually causing hate. They're really making a comment. You know, and the line is difficult to draw, but I think we need to be a bit careful about where that line is at the moment. Allow people maybe a warning rather than take them straight to court.
All right, lovely. Thank you so much, Alan Stevens, social media expert. Really good to talk to you. Well, joining me now, my panel, to get their thoughts on that. So joining me now, I've got Oscar Redrop and also... Oh, we talked to the panel about... No. All right, fair enough. Let's go for a break then. Why not?
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Football and gambling can go hand in hand and cause long-term problems. New figures show that young adults aged between 16 and 24 who have bet over the last year are more likely to report mental health issues compared to those in older age groups.
And joining us now to discuss this is Matt Burgess, who is a former gambling addict and now helps those to deal with their own gambling issues.
Yeah, I think gambling is one of those things that is so accessible now. You know, everyone's got a kind of mobile phone in their pocket, walks around with a kind of 24-hour casino, if you like. So I think it's really important that people realise that we have to sort of recognise that that is a month of quite condensed gambling, and we don't want people to sort of carry that on into their everyday life, because that's when it can become really risky and you know, it could become addictive.
I had no idea, though, that it was linked to first-time gambling. For the first time, people might be able to pick up and have a go. And then it doesn't end there. It goes on, because by then you've got the bug. Is that how it works?
You've got to remember, for things like the Euros, the World Cup, so you get a lot more people watching football and therefore potentially betting on football.
May I ask you about how severe your own gambling addiction got?
Well, look, I think there was a couple of touch points for me where I realised that things were getting out of hand. There were some times at university where, you know, I kind of thought, you know, I'm definitely doing this a bit too much, but, you know, kind of thought maybe it would move on once I left, but it didn't. It did follow me. And then, you know, I got to points where I was at my worst gambling 16, 17 hours a day. I was spending huge amounts of money. It can spiral out of control very, very quickly, and that was the important thing that we want to highlight is, you know, what can start as fun can become very, very dangerous in a sense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dewbs Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 17 minutes after 5 o'clock. Welcome. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Next now, it is time for the interview. And this week, I'm joined by the mother of the victim from the tragic attack in Nottingham, June last year. So joining me now is Emma Webber. Emma, thank you so much for joining me. Really good to talk to you. Now, Emma, so this week was a very important week because we had the event with the Care Quality Commission, the review, and we got the results of that. So can you talk us through what happened and what the outcome was?
Yeah, so it's called a Section 48, which was requested by the then Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, back in, January of this year. There were 3 parts to the Section 48, which is an urgent review, and 2 parts were the trust itself and how they were dealing with adult mental health patients, their secure unit, I think Repton, something like that it's called, and then the 3rd part was for the very first time, actually, this has never been done before, was into the care of a patient, which is Radicalization. So the outcome was on Monday. It was utterly damning. The now Health Secretary's words. It was catastrophic and alarming, with failures throughout. So we've known for a few weeks because we did have prior knowledge of it, but it was still. I think it was worse when it was live and the public were aware of the horror as well. And it just never stops. And then on the back of the previous night, Panorama had done a half-hour special without any prior contact or use of us as families. It was Callakane's family. So yeah, it's been a bit of a week.
How do you feel about what you heard there? Because I would agree with you 100%. You said that these people are supposed to be keeping Callakane in check. They've got blood on their hands because this seems to be a narrative in terms of mental health that we don't seem to be realising. Well, somebody in charge knows how dangerous someone is, but they let these people out and they let them run riot.
He was discharged towards the end in the autumn of 2022, and he was discharged with no risk assessment, no face-to-face intervention or meeting him. He was discharged on the basis that he hadn't turned up for, I think it was 2 appointments, and therefore he was discharged back into the community to the GP, and nothing was done. So, like you say, he was left, and he did go on that rampage. But it's been escalating since his diagnosis in 2020. It wasn't that one failure. It was catastrophic on so many levels. This is an individual that had been sectioned 4 times for violent offence. And at least 2 of those sectionings weren't at the right level. They were a Section 2 and it should have been a Section 3. So that makes a very big difference, apparently, to the treatment and the length of stay. This is a manipulative person. As we've spoken before, we firmly believe he's a dangerous, evil person, and he's calculated and he knew what he was doing. That being said, he was also very seriously mentally unwell, but it was his choice not to take his medication, and that's another thing that's come out of it. In the horrific sentencing hearing we had to sit through in Nottingham, and we heard the eminent expert doctors, particularly the one from the Crown prosecution service, state that he was treatment resistant. Therefore, it was inappropriate that he would be in a prison because he wouldn't respond to treatment. And therefore, we had to go to where he is now, the secure unit, because he would need this next level of intensive drug, this sort of antipsychotic drug. What it actually transpires, another thing we found from this week's report, was he wasn't treatment resistant. He was just resisting taking treatment. So he didn't take his medications. He stockpiled them. He lied and he manipulated. But now that he's in the secure unit, he isn't on the said extreme level one that he's needed. He's on the one that he was prescribed before. And now his violent tendencies have abated somewhat. So, we are just, it's hard to put into words. It's such failures, and it's so heartbreaking, and it's so tragic, but it's not isolated to him. I think it's endemic, and it's systemic failures in our mental health services, and it's, when it happens again, not if.
Well, it's always happening, isn't it? I mean, literally the day, I think it was, that on a Tuesday, somebody was attacked by someone with a knife in London. And it just seems to be that this is just a continual crime, and we don't know what kind of person this was in terms of his mental state, but there's an argument that anybody who does that is not mentally well. Now, was there not also one of the medical professionals who said that this man will kill with regard to Callaghan, and yet nothing was done?
Yeah, and I would question that medical professional. Well, if you were so concerned, what did you do? We've asked for much more detail, which the NHS are undertaking an independent investigation, which is sort of outsourced, so it's not internal. And we've now applied an awful lot more questions, and that's one of them. I think we understand the mental health aspect. We've never disputed well, but we hearing the family say on Monday evening in Panorama that they weren't aware of his diagnosis until after. I mean, this is somebody who's been mentally unwell for, well, it's over 3 years. By the time he murdered my son, and his mum's a registered nurse, so I struggled to believe, with 4 sectionings and everything that was going on, that they didn't know as well. So there's never one single point of failure in a disaster. It's a culmination of many different errors and failures. And yes, of course, it's the NHS, it's the mental health trusts that have failed most catastrophically. But I think there are questions to be had much further. There are so many missed opportunities within the police forces that we're still struggling to get proper terms of reference for their investigations. It's overwhelming, and it's hard to know where to begin when talking to you and talking to the media. It's everywhere. There were horrific mistakes and failures and poor errors of judgment that's led to my 19-year-old boy being brutally murdered. And there he is.
Oh, beautiful young man as well. It just,
and great.
Yeah, they're such good people, just taken for no reason other than sheer incompetence by professionals who knew the reality that this man was not safe on the streets of this country or anywhere. No, and there's so much more is going to come out, and thank God we've got support of an amazing legal team, because I don't know how we would continue, the 3 families, with all we've had to suffer in the last year. But the sheer levels of incompetence in policing, in investigations, in the criminal justice system, in the CPS, within the NHS, it's utterly overwhelming. And I really do hope that we actually will be able to make a difference with this tragedy, because it's happening again and again. And we've been contacted. I've personally been contacted by lots of people this week, with one exception. They were all very positive, very supportive. But in particular, one of the families from one of the girls in Southport asking, Emma, how do you cope? How do you deal with this horror? It's awful. But also quite a number of people who have got mental health illness themselves, or family members who are very worried about their loved ones who are not being treated properly. So, I can't carry cases for anybody else, but what I can do is try and use this tragedy to highlight it and give any pointers that I can, because it has to be addressed, because it will happen again. That's the worst thing. Now, what are your thoughts on this particular issue? The police are asking people to hand back knives and zombie knives and things like that, and then they're going to give them money for the knife. So whatever the person paid for the knife, there's sort of a knife amnesty where you get cash for knives. Do you think that then after September 24th, then these knives will then be illegal? Do you think that that is an efficient and effective way of partly trying to get knives off the street?
I think that there are so many strands. It's such a complex problem. We have an epidemic of knife crime in this country. America has gun crime, we have knife crime. And the legislation has to change. I think that there has to be some very challenging searching questions about stop and search. it's all parts of society that were affected. You know, my son was walking home from a night out, and this is somebody who had stockpiled his weapons and had planned the attack, and he hid in the shadows for 10 minutes waiting for my son. He then used a van an hour or so later to use it as a murder weapon. But then we've also got on the other end of the spectrum, we've got young people carrying knives because they feel scared, because they feel they can't leave the house without them, because they're in county lines, or it's drugs, or it's gang related. So I think that was the last. That was 2021 New Year's Eve. Bless his heart. It's so hard to see his pictures. But it's such a. We have to do something about it, because I don't have the answers, and I think changing the law is one thing. It must be illegal to carry a knife.
Absolutely.
Every household in this country has a lethal weapon in their kitchen, and that's the scary thing. Is how do we go back, and how do we unwind? So I'd welcome any change, because if it saves one life, then it saves one life. But it's not something we can just talk about and the government take an urgent action. We hear words, we hear sentences, and they're like white noise. I think it's actions that are counting, and we're expecting to meet with Yvette Cooper over the next few weeks. We've already met with the Attorney General, who's promised a public inquiry, and we've met with Wes Streeting, and obviously in the past we've met with Keir Starmer himself. So we need to continue that, but it's hard, because it's when do we begin to grieve? I don't know, but I'm not prepared to stop until the people that are responsible are held to account, but also until the public in our country are made safe.
Emma, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate that. You are amazing, as are all the families, and I think that we need justice, and something needs to happen about the whole criminal justice system, because it's abhorrent, it's very disjointed, and we will, if we do not do something about it, we will carry on having people like that awful man just roaming our streets. Emma Webber, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Me.
That was, of course, Emma Webber. She's the mother of Barnaby Webber, who, along with Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates, was tragically killed in a knife attack by Valdo Kalakane in Nottingham. The families of the victims say they will continue to fight for justice and lasting change. But right now, it's just coming up to 5:30. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online, and on digital radio. Still to come, the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, do you believe clapping for the NHS put them on a pedestal? You'll hear the thoughts on my panel, James Schneider and Oscar Redrop. But first, let's get your latest news.
It's 5:30. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. It's understood at least 24 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza overnight, including some women and children. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has just arrived in Israel to push for a ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza. It comes as the Israeli Prime Minister says he's cautiously optimistic about a potential ceasefire. However, a senior Hamas representative says any deal is still a way off. In Ukraine, safety at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is deteriorating, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. An explosive detonated just outside the site's protected area, which has been occupied by Russian soldiers since the early stages of the war. Official figures show 9 migrant boats were brought ashore from the English Channel yesterday, carrying almost 500 people. Hundreds more have made the crossings this week, bringing the total number reaching UK waters so far this year to 19,000. The Home Secretary is launching a major crackdown on misogyny, saying it will be treated as a form of extremism. Yvette Cooper has ordered a review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how best to tackle threats posed by harmful ideologies. The analysis will look at hatred of women as one of the ideological trends that the government says is gaining traction. A Don't Swim alert's been issued for Exmouth Beach in Devon after South West Water admitted it was struggling to contain a sewage leak. The firms apologise for a burst pipe and insist engineers are working around the clock to fix the problem. And Donald Trump went on the attack at a campaign event in Pennsylvania last night, twice telling supporters he was better looking than his election rival. The former president was delivering a speech focused on the economy when he asked supporters if they'd mind if he went off script.
I'm a better-looking person than Kamala. No, I couldn't.
His opponent's planning a bus tour starting in Pittsburgh today. Americans head to the polls in November. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Sunny spells continuing through Sunday with a couple of showers further north, but it is all change as we move into Monday with some rain arriving. And that's from these frontal systems out in the Atlantic. But first, we do have a ridge of high pressure firmly across at least the southern half of the UK. It's even quite a settled afternoon. So plenty of sunshine around. There is some cloud around, but that'll generally start to melt away through this evening. But further north, we do start to see the beginning of these frontal systems, bringing some cloud and some rain across northwest Scotland. We also do see some drizzly showers moving into the southwest for southwest and parts of Wales as well. Cool though ahead of this, temperatures down into single figures in some eastern parts, and there may be a few mist and fog patches to start the day on Monday too. And fairly bright and sunny if you're starting the day in the far northeast of Scotland, but it is already going to be quite a cloudy picture with quite persistent rain, some of this quite heavy at times, particularly in western parts as well. Northern Ireland seeing a very cloudy start to the day, rain already very close by and quite drizzly conditions. Wales and the southwest holding on to these very drizzly showers moving through this morning, but the central and southeastern half of England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday and quite a pleasant morning. But it won't last too long. We're going to see this cloud and rain steadily moving westwards. We're going to see drizzle and rain ahead of it, and then heavy rain arriving into the afternoon. Strong southerly winds as well, particularly through the Irish Sea where we could see some gales as well. But ahead of that, warm and humid air, and we could still get 26 degrees in the far east of England, but cooler underneath this rain at best into the teens. And we do have a rain warning out as well. There could be some very difficult driving conditions with the strong wind and spray on the road as we head through the evening for southwest Scotland. Unsettled then as we head through the rest of the week with some particularly wet and windy weather across the north on Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Catch you later.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? What have you been doing? It's just coming towards the end of the show. It's 36 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, do you believe clapping for the NHS puts them on a pedestal? Now, a health ombudsman has warned that treating the NHS like a national religion during the pandemic, including widespread clapping, we all did it, did you? I did, may have had dangerous repercussions by potentially shielding the service from criticism. The Ombudsman is calling for a radical overhaul of the NHS and urges health leaders to pay attention to the growing number of patient complaints, which have surged by 50%. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you believe that clapping for the NHS had put them on a pedestal? Well, joining me now is former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, and also former Labour advisor, James Schneider. Oscar, we'll start with you. Did you clap for the NHS?
I did. Actually, I think I banged a few pots.
Did you?
You know, the wooden spoon and the...
I can imagine it was all very middle class.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Well, no, look, I think at that moment in time, I think if we were to criticise the nation getting together at what was a very traumatic period of time for us all, and showing support for frontline workers who were sacrificing often their lives to keep people safe and treat people with COVID, I think if we're criticising that, where there's a slight overstretch. Nonetheless, the NHS is broken, and oddly, I think that we're in a place of pretty much political consensus on that. I think Wes Streeting on his, day one of, I'm in the department, and I think he declared it broken. I think, you'll see all the leadership candidates talk about, from a Conservative perspective, talk about, wide sweeping reforms that it needs. So he's got that bit right. Keir Starmer, Wes Streeting, and I think all the Conservative candidates will identify the NHS as being broken. I think clapping at that moment in time, and also it hasn't escaped criticism because of that clapping.
So you don't believe that this is correct, this comment?
No, not at all, not at all. Like, we have to be measured with these things. I think the NHS being named broken, I think is right. I think that is accurate. But I think then kind of being quite lazy and assigning that to the fact that as a nation we went out and clapped for the NHS. I don't think the NHS is on this pedestal anymore. I think it's an outdated viewpoint. It's just not there.
Well, that's what her name is, Rebecca Hilson-Rath, and she warned against treating the health services as a national religion. She is she's a health ombudsman. She's part of that. Well, look, I'll be honest. When I started at GBNews about 3 years ago, I do monologues that would criticise the NHS, and I would say that it's a rip-off, because even my own private medical cover, it would be actually less expensive than the amount that each person contributes per person towards the NHS, which I think is just over £3,000. So in my view, I did criticise it and I used to get so much backlash for it. People say, "How can you say that?" And I knew if I did a monologue on it that I would be attacked. Now, if I do a monologue on it, totally different. Things have changed. What do you think, James?
Well, I think this ombudsman needs to give their head a wobble. I think the idea that showing gratitude to the people that were keeping us and our loved ones safe is wrong, or is putting... they should have been put on the pedestal at that time. The NHS care workers, people who were keeping us safe and keeping the country going. As for this kind of national religion thing, the NHS is the most civilised thing in our country. The fact that you don't have to worry about going bankrupt or anything like that if you get sick, that you can... You
do need to worry about the NHS if you get sick. Have you seen the queues?
Hold on, I said you don't have to worry about going bankrupt and so on now. Then we look at what is going on in terms of how it's performing. And in loads of cases, it's not performing well. You'd see the complaints. In some cases, it still really is. I had some experience with the NHS this year, and it was great. It all went extremely well. But I know that there are lots of complaints and there are lots of issues. Then we have to look at why. Why is that? What's going on? And I think, yes, you can look at funding, and there's been a slower increase in funding than relative similar countries over the last few years, last couple of decades, and that's one thing. But also, we've had the breaking up of the thing which makes the NHS effective, which is that it's a single national entity, which means that it can negotiate with drugs companies for cheaper drugs, for medical equipment at a cheaper rate, and all of those things, which has been broken up and part privatised over the last couple of decades, with the breaking up of the NHS into supposedly competing trusts, which is a nonsense. If you're going to have a national health service, it should be national. And the introduction of private healthcare into parts of it, which can take the easier ends, the more profitable bits, which sucks money out of frontline services. So, of course, there are...
No, but it also relieves pressure as well, doesn't it, really? So, on one side... but on one side, it might do that, and I don't disagree with that. But on the other side, it does alleviate a little bit of the pressure as people get out of the NHS waiting list and go private.
Well, if, for example, a doctor who is an NHS doctor but is also doing private shifts, and the bits that are easier to do and are lower cost to do are being done private, then the net effect of that is to suck resources from the NHS to the private. That doesn't mean that the private person is doing anything wrong. That is the net effect in aggregate.
I don't see it.
And we're seeing more and more on that. So if we want the NHS to be secure, which I think everyone does. The reason why people love the principle of the NHS is because it says healthcare is a human right. In a civilised society, we provide it for everyone. And that's why people love that idea, because it's a really wonderful idea. We're going to need to go back to the principles that it was set up with, which it should be national, it should be public, and it should use the strength that we have with...
Listen, I'm not sure that that's a realistic model, especially if you factor in mass migration and you factor in the amount of money that's required to facilitate that.
Yeah, I think the worry is that, you know, we all hark, and James did it then, and I get it, when we hark back to, you know, when the NHS began, and we live in an entirely different UK now. Demographic change, you know, migration has had an impact, but more than anything, an ageing population. Like, we have to completely rethink how the NHS is going to survive long term. Again, really interesting hearing you say that when you said that, you know, a couple of years ago, let's say, all the vitriol and hate in the world came your way, and now we're actually, I think, a healthy moment in time where both political parties from across the spectrum actually understand that it is going to have to change, and it is going to have to change quite drastically, because we can sit in TV studios and we can all say really lovely, warm things about the NHS and, you know, what it was like way back when, and those founding principles, which are great, don't get me wrong, but ultimately, if that frontline service that people are not able to want, either, you know, they're way back of the queue, treatments are delayed, you know, unfortunately, those principles can result in people dying if we just solely protect and kind of put them on the pedestal. I think we have to make a distinction, though, between the frontline workers, the nurses, etc., and then there's this other slightly hidden tier from the public, which is
the managers,
who are probably on
over
crazy lovely salaries, and they sit in an office all day and they kind of stretch back. I think if Wes really wants to, you know, cut his teeth and show I'm actually quite serious about it,
that's where it needs to go.
That's where some of
net zero, DEI, all of that needs to go. They need to manage it better. They need to start spending the money properly. I'm just going to quickly read one of these. Richard Hill says, I don't think he's very good at maths if he thinks people going private doesn't save the NHS money. He's referring to you. If people going private doesn't save money, that's what Richard's saying.
Well, the provision is being trained by the public, that we've paid for the training of the doctors and the facilities, and then the cheaper end of that type of practice is then being done at a profit by the private, which has been subsidised by the public. Now, I just want to make a couple of other points.
Well, no. Let me just come back to that point. That doesn't really work out, because the training would have been paid for irrespective of whether people go private or use the NHS.
So a doctor can either be delivering things in the NHS or in a private setting.
Many of them do.
No. But at the same time, of course, many of them do both. But at the same time, they can only be in one of two places.
But usually, what they'll do is they'll work full time for the NHS, and in their spare time do other jobs. That's how it usually works. They don't go, I'm going to take a day off to go private. That's not how it works. Right.
So what I'm saying is, the more things that are moved into private, which the private companies don't want the complicated, difficult to do bits because they're not profitable.
Yes.
You're hiving off the easier to do
So what?
bits.
You're still relieving pressure. Whether you hive off the easier to do or the harder jobs, you're still relieving pressure from the easier to do jobs.
No, it isn't relieving pressure, because it's the same. No, it's the same doctors and the same facilities
in their spare time, or on a day off.
It's the same doctors.
It's the same hospital on.
When the reason why we should be very alarmed about Wes.
I've got about 20 seconds, and then I've got to go to.
When members of the political class talk about changing the NHS, what they're talking about is cutting your maternity services, making it further to go to A&E, and reducing services overall. That is what it has meant whenever people from the Cameron end of the Conservative Party or the Blair end of the Labour Party mean it. That's what they're talking about. And that's what Wes Streeting is talking about, and that's what the Tory party is talking about.
He's on the Labour side of things, actually. And if that is part of the equation, then it has to happen. Otherwise, everything suffers. So sometimes you actually have to cut off one thing to allow everything to thrive. So
I don't think we should be cutting maternity services, A&Es.
Let's just decide. Well, they'll determine that. But the bottom line is, absolutely, they shouldn't cut maternity and A&E, but that's not the point. They can cut other things, and they just have to work out what it is. But the bottom line is, I don't think they can carry on with this model of absolutely free for absolutely everybody at the point of need from anywhere in the world, because I think that is a problem. That is a problem.
And
I've got to go for a break, but we will come back to that. Coming up, those Supplements Sunday, my panel and I will discuss some of the news stories that caught their eye. Do not go anywhere. That's next.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said storm.
you made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is a big old headache because we talk a lot about GP appointments, don't we? But certainly almost everyone I know struggles to see a dentist when they need one.
Yes.
You know the best time to go to a dentist? When? 2:30. 2:30.
That's actually quite good. It's better than my gags.
The guy that went into Goa, to India, to get his dental treatment, is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, so tell us about that. I mean, this is how desperate people are to get treatment now. So what's the story?
OK, the story is a guy couldn't get an appointment at the NHS, so he went all the way to Goa in India to get his dental appointment. Now, I think he probably just wanted to go on holiday, and he thought, I know, why don't I go on holiday to Goa and then get my teeth done? Look, people are travelling in their droves. There's whole aeroplanes full of people with medical tourists. Like in Turkey, you get a whole aeroplane with people with hair implants and things like that.
Well, yeah. I was going to go to
turkey teeth, isn't it?
Turkey teeth.
Turkey teeth. Well, now we've got
that's when they strip the tooth down and you have these little pegs.
Yes, they strip them down, but in many cases they strip them down far too low, so the nerve is exposed and it gets infected, and it's exposed to the elements. So you get infection in the tooth, and then you have to essentially take them all off. But by then the infection spreads so far. I was getting my nails done the other day, which I don't do very often, and my nail technician said to me, "Is your dad still a dentist?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Please, can I have an emergency appointment? I went to Turkey and I got my teeth done, and now they look incredible, but I'm in so much pain. They're all infected." She had 15 taken out from the top and 12 from the bottom, and it's an absolute disaster. But this is what people are feeling like they have to do.
So medical tourism doesn't always work.
No, but it shows, doesn't it, Alex, that people can't get their teeth sorted here, so they go elsewhere. Listen, do you floss, by the way?
Don't floss. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is GB News. It's time for Supplements Sunday, the part of the show where the panel and I talk through some of the other topics that have caught their eye. But before we do that, I'm just going to read some of these views. Peter says, "We thought the nurses were sacrificing for us when we clapped. Never again. They had plenty of time to learn dance routines as there was no one in hospital. We were lied to." That's what he says. They did a lot of work as well, and when many of us wouldn't have gone. Richard said the NHS is a completely broken model. No criticism of hard-working nurses and first responders, but it is the absurd Soviet system which is not fit for purpose. We should have a social insurance model, as in most of Europe. I'm inclined to agree with that. But right now, let's find out some of the stories that have caught my panel's eye. Joining me, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, and also former Labour advisor, James Snyder. James Snyder, what have you found?
I found this very interesting story that a diplomat in the Foreign Office called Mark Smith resigned on Friday over what he said was possible complicity of the Foreign Office with Israel's war crimes committed against the Palestinians. He was an expert, or is an expert, in arms sales policy. And his view is that we should have banned arms sales to Israel because our bombs and our bullets are involved in war crimes and crime.
It's a very small proportion of our arms that are sent to Israel, though, isn't it?
Even if that were true.
Well, it is true.
Even if that were true.
It is true.
Even if that were true.
Well, it is. I'm just saying it is.
OK. Well, even if that were true.
No, but it is true.
What I'm saying is that would still make us complicit. If our parts that go into F-16 jets and F-35 jets, which then end up laying Gaza to rubble, then we are complicit. It doesn't matter the size or the scale. I mean, actually, the scale is larger than you're suggesting, but that doesn't matter. We are complicit through our bombs, our bullets, and our diplomatic cover. We are complicit with.
You could be literally complicit with everything. You could be complicit with the slave trade for wearing that shirt. You could be complicit for this. That.
Well, if we're sending weapons, that's pretty.
It's a trade. We're not giving them. They're buying.
Well, the reason why we have a whole legal structure set up for whether arms sales are within international law or not, and within our own domestic law, is because we don't want to be complicit in human rights abuses around the world.
Let's go with your supplement now. Oscar, what's yours about?
Again, sticking with foreign policy, Britain's leadership on Ukraine has slowed down, and that is according to Zelensky, and he's told that directly to Keir Starmer. I find that thoroughly depressing. And I find it depressing for a number of reasons. It'd be interesting to hear the views of your viewers in terms of support for Ukraine. Perhaps that has dried out. Perhaps people are more sceptical about the money we've, pushed into the war. I get it. However, there is a war on our continent, and the fact that our support from that country may be seen to be drying up is, I think, a completely
thank you, Oscar.
dangerous
Stop talking.
thing.
Sorry, I've been giving him the wrap-up sign. He's still gabbing on. But I'll do my supplement very quickly. Prince Harry, he's still going on, looking back, feeling sorry for himself. It's still at the age of 40. Grow up, Harry. Right, on today's show, I've been asking, will Labour's plan to crack down on hateful beliefs threaten free speech? According to our Twitter poll, 93% of you say yes, 7% of you say no. Got to say a huge thank you to my panel, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, and also former Labour advisor James Schneider. And as a very huge thank you to you at home for your company. I look forward to seeing you same time, same place, actually tomorrow for breakfast. Up next, it's Neil Oliver.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. A fine evening of weather ahead, some hazy sunshine, but it will be turning cloudier from the west with rain arriving tomorrow. And that's because we've got some low pressure system out towards the west. But first of all, we do have a ridge of high pressure across most of the country, and we have fairly settled conditions through Sunday evening. So fairly dry and clear for much of the country, but we do start to see that frontal system pushing into western Scotland overnight, that rain turning more persistent here, and we do still have this strengthening southerly breeze arriving from the west as well. Cool though first across the east, and perhaps down into single figures in some rural spots as well. But it will be quite a bright start to the day across eastern parts, particularly for the northeast of Scotland at first. But we do have quite a lot of cloud and rain across western parts, and that will be turning more persistent as we head through the day. Again, some sunshine for the far east, but Northern Ireland, very much a cloudy day with that rain becoming more persistent through the morning. Wales will start to see some showery, drizzly showers moving up from the southwest, but central parts and the southeast of England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday. And we will continue with that very much east-west split. Sunshine for the far east, but very cloudy, and we've got some increasing strengthening southerly winds, and that rain will be turning heavy as we head later on into Monday. A rain warning is in force for southwest Scotland, difficult driving conditions here. Cool underneath this cloud and rain, best into the mid-teens, but still some warmth for the southeast of England. By Tuesday, most of that rain will have cleared away much of the country, still lingering on in the far northeast, and it'll be a breezy day with blustery showers, particularly across parts of England, and there'll be some strong winds across the far northwest of Scotland too. Heading into the rest of the next week, it will be staying unsettled with particularly wet and windy weather into Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours, but time is ticking. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 632